Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight in 7 haunted graveyard horror stories from real life, we step through the rusted gates of cemeteries where names are carved in stone, flowers wither overnight, and the earth itself remembers what we try to forget. These are chilling accounts of bells that toll without wind, whispers leaking from cracked mausoleums, and footsteps echoing across gravel paths when you know you are utterly alone. This is a new channel, and my goal this month is to reach 3,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers watch and leave without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Subscribe now. Before we begin, share in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there is a cemetery in your town that unsettles you, type its name. Because once you step past the gates of these haunted resting grounds, not everything allows you to leave. Kill the lights. Silence the world, take a slow breath, and let us begin. I'm posting this under a throwaway because my real name is uncommon, and I don't want anyone from the south suburbs recognizing me. If you live near Chicago, you already know the place I'm going to talk about. If you don't, just picture a little patch of sinking, stones and crooked fences swallowed by woods and swamp, not even the size of a baseball diamond, and then remember that every single person you've ever met swears their cousin went there once and saw something. This happened last fall, on a Thursday night, because that's when my friend Luis got off work early, and my sister Tessa didn't have class Friday morning. I was 32 at the time. I'm not a thrill seeker. I'm the guy who hands people water when they start a story with, "You won't believe this." I run IT for a dental group. The scariest part of my day is explaining to a hygienist why the shared drive moved. But I grew up hearing about Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, ghost lights, a lady in white, phantom horses pulling a plow through the swamp. It's as local as hot dogs without ketchup and construction that never ends. The plan was dumb but harmless. Tessa, who's 23 and thinks skepticism is just a pose, had been telling Luis about the cemetery all week. "You've never been?" She kept asking him like not visiting was a moral failing. He'd only moved up from Texas 2 years ago. "Bro, I didn't come to Chicago for the winter and haunted ditches," he said. I said I'd drive. It's not far. Maybe 30 minutes from where we live in Oak Lawn. The route is just forest preserves and the kind of roads where your headlights catch 1,000 reflective eyes. Deer, raccoons, sometimes feral cats. You pull off at a little gravel turnout near the woods. There's a chain across a path now. The official line is the cemetery closes at dusk. But the forest preserve cops are spread thin and people ignore rules. We brought stupid stuff because that's how you treat this when you think nothing's going to happen. A thermal camera Luis uses for HVAC inspections. One of those cheap EMF readers from Amazon that looks like a multicolored thermometer. A flashlight that could probably fry an egg if it sat on your hand. And a disposable camera because Tessa had seen a TikTok where film catches things that phones miss. Also a backpack with water and granola bars and a small first aid kit, because my anxiety doesn't clock out for adventures. It was 48 degrees, sky the color of the inside of a seashell, with that fall smell that's sweet and moldy at the same time. We parked around 8. You can hear the cars on 143rd if the wind is right, but the woods eat sound in a way that makes you feel like you're underwater. We went past the chain and the path swallowed our footsteps. On the right, the swamp opens up black and glassy. Bugs tracked the beam of my flashlight like snow. Tessa walked ahead, her phone camera lit up, narrating like she was hosting a tour. "Okay, so back here is where the old farm used to be. People see a man plowing with a horse in the fog. And somewhere that way," she pointed into the dark, "there used to be a house that only appears if you don't look at it straight on." She sounded happy, like we were there to pick apples. Louis said, "You guys got the weirdest hobbies." We turned left at the broken fence and there it was. Bachelor's Grove. When you finally see it, you wonder why it has such a big reputation. It's tiny, a kid-sized grid of headstones, many sunk to their shoulders in the ground. There's a metal fence someone installed in the last decade or so, though a section on the far side hangs crooked like a loose tooth. The stones have names that feel like the side dishes of a family. Hannah, Cyrus, Mother, and a lot of them are chipped. A few are clean because people adopt them or fix them as projects, but most wear the same look as the trees. Tired and leaning. There were other people in there when we arrived. 2 high school kids with a speaker playing low, and a guy in a camo jacket who nodded at us and kept to himself. I heard laughter somewhere in the trees. It died almost immediately. The kind of laugh you do when you're proving to your friend you're not scared. We did the slow circle you do in graveyards, reading names out loud like you're taking attendance. The temperature dropped, or felt like it did. My breath showed in the beam. Luis exchanged the EMF reader between his hands, made the needle jump by bringing it by his phone, and then felt guilty like he'd cheated. The guy in the camo jacket approached us. Up close, he wasn't intimidating, just older, late 50s, and the kind of thin you get from either running or worrying. He kept his hands visible. "Y'all new?" he asked. "We're locals," Tessa said, which is what people say when they're proud of being from a place that outsiders make fun of. He smiled with half his mouth and pointed with his chin toward a particularly old stone, a block carved with the name Infant Daughter. "Leave that one alone," he said. "Folks touch it and feel wrong for a week." "We're not touching anything," I said. "Just walking," he nodded. "Good, too many kids treat this like a dare." "This isn't Six Flags." Tessa said something polite and we moved on. The camo guy stayed near the Infant Daughter. I noticed he had a camera bag. Real gear, not a disposable Kodak. I wondered if he was one of those people who believe in EVPs and carry around spirit boxes. I'm not mocking. People do what they need to make the world make sense. The EMF reader went flat and dead every time we passed a certain tree. I swapped batteries twice. It flickered back to life away from the trunk. Luis joked that the tree had Wi-Fi. The thermal camera drew a red outline of our shoes against the ground heat, made the stones glow cooled blue like bottles in lake water. At one corner near the broken fence, I saw a shape on the thermal screen. Just a cold patch, rounded at the top, tapering to shoulder width. If it had moved even a little, I would have said person. It didn't move. I raised the flashlight to the spot and there was nothing. Just the exhaust from the swamp catching the light. On the screen, the cold shape sat where the mist was not. I didn't point it out yet. It felt like naming it would be giving it permission. A fox darted in and out of the fence and I felt my shoulders drop, happy for the interruption of something real. The high school kids left. The laugh died again. Tessa lifted her disposable camera. "Say cheese, demons." "I don't say that," I said. "It's a joke." "Yeah." "I know still." She snapped a picture of the fence, a picture of the stone that always ends up in the local newspaper. Concrete, slightly too clean, with a family name like Bedbury or something. She took one of me and Luis. The flash washed the world in white for a half second. The camo guy flinched. "Sorry," Tessa said. He shook his head. "Just don't point it at the woods." Tessa half laughed at that. "Okay, we stayed an hour. You lose time there. Not because anything paranormal happens, but because the woods insist on it. The road noise fades. Your body loses track of what counts as cold." Tessa told us about a woman who supposedly appears sitting on a headstone in a white dress. "There are pictures if you want to believe." Luis said, "I dated a woman who wore white to a wedding. Same vibe." My flashlight threw shadows that doubled back on themselves. Around 9:30, the camo guy started packing. He hooked his camera bag over his shoulder, nodded to us again and said, "Don't let the lights walk you into the water." "The lights?" I asked. "You'll know 'em," he said, like he was teaching us the name of a plant that would make us sick. He stepped through the fence and disappeared down the path. Tessa said, "Lights? Like orbs?" Luis said, "I hate that I want to see one." We all needed to pee. There are no bathrooms. I volunteered to walk back to the car and then thought about the path alone and decided I could wait. That felt silly. It also felt like every bad story starts with, "We split up," and then we saw the light. At first I thought it was a car coming down the path, which makes no sense because there's a chain. It was a small warm sphere about the size of a grapefruit, floating maybe 3 feet off the ground beyond the broken fence. Not flickering, not moving fast, just there. My brain did what brains do and tried to assign it to something boring. A distant house light, an LED on a bike, someone with a lantern. Tessa turned slowly, like she'd been expecting it. She whispered, "Do you see that?" The whisper made it real in a way that a shout wouldn't. "Yeah," Luis said, voice flat like he was listening to his own heart. The light drifted to the right, threading between trees. "If you think you'd run toward it or away from it, you're just guessing." We didn't either. We watched it like it was a deer. It came closer, stopped just beyond the fence, and then moved left. Each time it moved, a very slight delay tugged at my stomach, as if my eyes received the movement a fraction after it happened. The EMF reader went all green, then fell dead. I realized I was holding the thermal camera like a shield. On the display, the light didn't exist. The woods were blue-black. The air was blue. Our bodies were orange and red. The light was nothing. Tessa raised the disposable camera, hesitated, and then lowered it. He said, "Don't point it at the woods," she whispered. And for the first time, her voice held an edge of something like respect. "Or fear soft as paper," I said. "He's just a guy." "Yeah, but also," she swallowed, "I feel like that thing wants us to follow it." "Yeah," Louis said. "Let's not," I said, and felt relief from saying it out loud. The light paused as if disappointed and then slid back into the trees. The path swallowed it. We all exhaled like we'd opened a door. It was only then I noticed we were alone. The high school kids were long gone. The laugh didn't carry. Somewhere to our left, something large moved in the brush. I convinced myself it was a deer by sheer force of will. "Okay," Tessa said. "We saw a thing. We can go." Luis didn't move. "Hang on." He crouched by one of the stones, holding the thermal camera low, and made a face. "Evan, the ground is colder here." "It's October," I said. "No, like, see?" I leaned over his shoulder. A rectangle on the screen near the stone glowed darker, the size of a coffin. Only a few degrees difference, but crisp-edged, like a negative photograph laid under the soil. When he moved the camera left, right, up, the rectangle stayed put. When he aimed it at me, I was normal. I turned to flesh and air on the screen. When he aimed back at the base of the stone, the cold rectangle waited like a silently opened trapdoor. "I don't like that," Tessa said, which was the closest she'd come all night to admitting anything got to her. We left. It felt cowardly and also sane. Back through the fence, past the tree that killed the EMF, past the chain on the path. The woods had that weird lit-from-within look they get when fog rises from cold ground. We didn't talk much. A rustle from the swamp kept pace with us for a few yards and then fell back. I tried not to think about the light. I tried not to think about the rectangle. Halfway to the car, Tessa stopped.
"Do you hear that?"
At first, no, then yes, a far-off clinking, steady as a metronome. Not fast, not slow, metal on metal or metal on glass. I told myself it was someone rigging a fishing rod at the water's edge. I told myself a lot of things. The clinking grew louder, then softened, then loud again like something swinging, or being swung. Luis said, "It's just a gate in the wind." "There's no wind," I said, because there wasn't. The air was still as held breath. The sound was coming from the right of the path, towards the swamp. I could see a patch of open water ahead, still as tar. In the beam of my flashlight, I caught particles hanging, not drifting. We reached the car. Every bone in my shoulders dropped an inch when I saw it. People break into cars there, not because it's haunted, but because it's unattended. The windows were fine. The tires were fine. We piled in like we expected the seats to be warm. Nobody turned the key for a second. We sat with our hands still where we'd placed them. And then something hit the back of the car. Not hard, not like a person slamming it. Just a knock, as deliberate as someone tapping your shoulder with a knuckle. Once, twice, 3 times. Luis cursed in Spanish, which is how you know he meant it. I turned the key. The engine turned the way an old man turns a doorknob. The 3rd knock happened again. I put the car in drive. The 4th knock didn't come. We rolled forward down the little strip of gravel and onto the road, and then we were moving. Tessa had both hands on the disposable camera like it was a live thing. "Do not open that window," I told her. "I wasn't going to," she said, which made me feel both dumb and a little better. We didn't talk until we were back on the main road with the comfort of suburban lights. When we did, it was one of those collisions where everyone speaks at once and then nobody does. Tessa said, "I'm not crazy, right?" "You saw the..." And Luis said, "The light wanted us to go with it," and I said, "I swear something tapped the car like it was asking to be let in." And then we all stopped because that phrasing felt wrong in my mouth. We stopped at a diner on Cicero that stays open late. The waitress had the kind of voice that says, "I've heard worse." We sat in a booth under fluorescent lights that made us all look like we lived underwater. The white noise of people ordering eggs did more to bring me back to Earth than anything else. I didn't want to go home yet. I didn't want to sit alone with the parts my brain would try to smooth down. We put the disposable camera on the table and looked at it like it might jump. "Let's get these developed tomorrow." Tessa said. Tomorrow, I agreed, like making a plan would tether the world to something. Luis just nodded. We didn't mention the clinking. We didn't mention the shape on the thermal screen. We each silently decided on the name to give the sound and then didn't say it. The next day, I went to work. At lunch, I met Tessa at the Walgreens near her apartment. She'd already dropped off the camera that morning. The prints were ready, bright in that way cheap prints are, like they don't know the world is complicated. We bought them and sat in her car to flip through like kids going through trading cards. Most were exactly what you'd expect. Blurry stones, a shot of Luis's thumbs, a picture of me with my eyes half closed and the whites showing like I'm mid-exorcism. We laughed in the way you laugh to hear your own voice. Then we reached the last 6. The first of those was the fence. Except past the fence where the path should have been empty, something sat. Not the woman in white anyone could Google. This was, look, I know how this sounds. It looked like a person sitting on the ground with their knees drawn to their chest. The face was a smudge, but you could count the fingers where hands wrapped around shins. The clothes were wrong for now. Too much fabric, buttons like seeds. If you stared at it, it didn't resolve. It almost resolved, and then your eyes slid off like there was Vaseline on the lens of your brain. Who was there? Tessa asked. Her voice had the bright edge of lying to yourself. Was that the camo guy? Maybe he... No, I said, because my skin knew before my mouth did. The next print showed the same spot from slightly left, like she'd shifted her weight. The shape sat exactly the same. The trees behind it had changed. A branch in one was down in the other, like the two pictures were taken hours apart. They weren't. There was our breath in both frames like little ghosts, and we'd been in t-shirts under hoodies. The temperature hadn't shifted. Luis didn't say anything. His hands were on his knees, pressed flat, the same way he'd sat during a different long night when his plane landed and the text he was waiting for didn't come. He looked like that. The third print was the one that made me put it down. It was a close shot of one of the stones, infant daughter. You could see the grains of the concrete and a little smear of mud like a fingerprint. Behind the stone, slightly out of focus, the same sitting shape. But now there was detail that made my stomach do something ugly. The shape's head was tilted in a way that people don't do if they have a spine. The fingers had dirt under them like someone who'd been digging. The face. Look, I'm going to be careful here because I hate exaggerations, had a texture like wet paper. Okay, Tessa said softly. Okay, that one is not funny. None of this is funny, I said before I could stop myself. Don't, she warned. Her eyes were bright like she might cry or laugh. Don't make it bigger. I'm not, I said, even though we both knew I was thinking about the light, the rectangle, the knocks on the car, and how the camo guy had told us not to point the camera toward the woods. The last 3 prints were all the same, literally the same. We checked the photo numbers. All had the same number. In each, the frame was filled with fog or maybe a close-up of fabric, gray and soft, with a vertical seam to the left. I flipped one sideways. I flipped another. I don't know why I did this next part. I held one up to my face and breathed in. It smelled like the car after we left the cemetery. Not bad. Not anything I could describe. Just a scent that isn't yours and isn't the place you're in. The way coats smell when you get them out in November and the cold from last year is still holding on. I handed the photos back to Tessa. We sat for a long minute, she said. Do we show Luis? Yeah, I said, because that was the right thing and also because I didn't want the decision to be mine alone. We drove to Luis's apartment. He lives in one of those places where everything is new and the walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor rehearse guitar. He opened the door before we knocked. He must have been watching the lot. He had the thermal camera on the table. He said, I pulled the card. He looked tired. We went through the stills he'd taken. Most were the same heat blobs you'd expect. In 3, you could see our figures against the stones, bright like winter breath on a window. And then, at the bottom of the folder, a series of files I didn't remember him having time to take. 6 frames fired off like an accidental shutter. In each, the camera was aimed at the ground just inside the fence. The rectangles showed. We watched it for 5 seconds. 10. It didn't move. Then, without the camera moving, no blur, no shift of angle, the rectangle's outline bowed upward, like a lid being pressed from beneath. It rose half an inch, stopped, sank back down, gentle as a sleeping person turning in a bed. We all said something at the same time again, so it came out like one word. I said something like, nope. Tessa said something like, okay. Luis said something like, Dios. Then we were quiet. Maybe it was an animal, I offered, because the need to tuck the world back into boxes is strong. Which animal opens from underneath? Luis asked, and then decides not to? We stared at the screen like we could push our eyes through it and make a better answer. That night I dreamed. I need to say that up front because I'm a skeptic in the way that means I talk myself out of making connections. And I know dreams show up when your brain is trying to file things. In the dream, I was at the cemetery. Not walking, just there like the way a map shows a place. The woods were careful with their noise. The light came. It hovered, but when it drifted, I followed. I didn't want to. I felt my feet move the way your legs move when you're too tired to stop them. The light led me to the broken fence and then just past it and then off the path where the ground goes from dirt to sponge. It stopped at the edge of the water. The swamp there is shallow. The kind where leaves lie and never rot all the way, just stack up until they are ground. The light hovered an inch above, and then in the dream, I knew. Like how you know the rules of a place you've been many times if I stepped in after it. The water would be ground and the ground would be water and I would go down. I woke to my phone buzzing. It was 3:11 a.m. The notification was from our building's security app, the one they installed after a string of catalytic converter thefts. Motion detected rear lot. I opened the feed. The rear lot camera faces the dumpsters and the line of cars. The video was 20 seconds long and very boring. You see a raccoon. You see a plastic bag move like it's alive, and then you realize it's air from the vent. I watched it twice and set the phone down. I rolled over and saw something in the dark, the outline of the chair by the window, and convinced myself it wasn't a person. Because of course it wasn't. Then I realized what I was actually listening for wasn't movement. It was a sound. I don't know if you've ever slept in a room with a clock that's too loud. This wasn't that. This was quieter. It came every 3 seconds, soft metal or glass clink. I sat up. I told myself it was the baseboard heater cooling. I told myself it was the pipe. I told myself a lot of things because if I'd called it what I think it was, if I'd said bell, I might have had to do something about it. I stayed awake until the gray part of morning. On Saturday, we decided to do something normal to reset whatever had unraveled. There's a farmer's market in Evergreen Park that runs until the weather decides it can't. We walked through it like normal people and held coffee we didn't finish. Tessa kept a hand in her jacket pocket like she was checking for something. I pretended not to notice. Luis bought apples and then forgot them on a bench. On the way back to the car, a man stopped us. Not the camo guy, a retired firefighter. I only know because he was wearing a shirt with a station number and because Chicago area firefighters are built like guys you'd trust to lift a couch without complaining. He nodded at Tessa. "You the girl from the Walgreens pictures?" he asked. It was such a weird sentence that we just stared. Then he realized how it sounded and put his hands up like he was surrendering to common sense. "Sorry, my daughter works the photo counter. She always shows me the weird ones," he said. Like that was a normal father-daughter activity. "You got some weird ones?" "Yeah," Tessa said, voice small. He was kind in the way practical people are. "I've seen those lights," he said conversationally. "Back when I was dating my wife." "You think it's a dare?" "It's not," he squinted at me. "You with her out there?" "Yeah," I said. "Okay," he said, and I believed he meant it. He looked like he wanted to say more. Then he didn't. "Have a good day," he said, and walked away. He paused at a flower vendor and picked up a bundle of mums, and the world snapped back to itself. On Sunday, Tessa texted me a picture of her living room window. On the inside of the glass, near the bottom, 3 smudges had appeared overnight. Not dirty exactly, not visible unless the light hit right. 3 pale ovals the size and shape of finger pads pressed in a pattern like someone had braced a hand against the glass while standing outside and reaching up. Except they were inside. She wiped them with Windex and they ghosted out and then came back when the sun moved. She laughed in text, LOL ghost Windex, and followed it with, "Come over after dinner." I sent back a thumbs up and a lie about being already in bed. Monday morning, I checked the back of my car because I'm that person now. Nothing, no scratches, no mud prints, no reason to feel the breath leave my lungs. Except when I opened the trunk to grab the grocery bags rolled in a ball, there was a slip of something caught in the hinge. I pulled it free. It was a photograph. Not glossy like the Walgreens prints. Matte, slightly smaller. with scalloped edges like pictures from the 60s your grandmother keeps in a box. The image had faded to that greenish haze old photos wear, even if they were black and white. The paper had been damp at some point and dried wavy. There were no people in the picture. It was a shot of a field with a low fence and a tree line in the distance. In the foreground, slightly out of focus, a wooden post with a bell hanging from a bracket. One of those old bells people used to ring to call workers in or to signal trouble. The kind with a clapper and a rope. I turned it over. On the back, someone had written a year, 1963, and below that, a name I won't write here because if you're from the area, you know the family, and I don't want this connected to anyone who didn't ask for it. I stood there for a minute with the picture in my hand, the morning cold making my ears ache, and then I slid it into an envelope and put it in the drawer with takeout menus. I told myself there was a rational explanation. People leave junk everywhere. Old photos are fetish objects. A kid could have slipped it in as a prank. I didn't tell Tessa or Luis. In the middle of a story like this, you start rationing what you give other people. Not because you're hiding, but because you're trying not to put weight on them. All of this would be a collection of odd things that happened after we went to a famously weird place. And you could say we primed ourselves, and I'd agree. Except 2 nights later, I stopped at a red light near the Forest Preserve entrance on my way home. It had rained. The road was shiny and empty. My wipers did that quiet squeak because I need to replace them. On my right, through the line of trees, there's a gap where you can see a slice of the path if your angle is just right. There was a light in the dark, warm, grapefruit-sized, hovering 3 feet off the ground. Not moving, not flickering, just there. The red light on the traffic signal washed the inside of my car. The wipers squeaked. The light in the woods did not draw closer. I did not follow it. The signal turned green. A car behind me tapped their horn because the world is the world. I drove. I moved the photograph from the drawer to the glove compartment, not because I wanted it with me, but because I didn't want it in my house. I haven't been back to Bachelor's Grove since. Neither have Tessa or Luis. We don't talk about it, not because we agreed not to, but because when we're together now, we are careful with our topics like people who went through a winter and aren't ready to talk about the snow. Sometimes, at night, if my apartment is very still and the heater is off and I'm in that place between sleeping and not, I hear it, a soft clink every few seconds, regular as a pulse. It's faint enough that I can make it be anything. My neighbor's keys, a pipe, the fridge cycle. I choose a different answer each time. That's the deal. If this was a movie, this is where something crawls out of the wall. Real life is quieter and meaner. It asks you to carry the sound around and never be sure whether it's in your head or in the world. Tessa texted me last week. A photo from her phone of a carved pumpkin on her porch with triangle eyes and a mouth like someone learning to smile. Underneath she wrote, "Come over." I made chili. I did. We ate at her coffee table and watched weather reports, and it felt like the kind of normal that people make and then keep like a candle. When I left, she handed me a bag with half the chili and a stack of old Walgreens prints she was throwing out. "If you want any," she said casual. When I got home, I flipped through them. Pictures of cats that were not hers because she cat sits. Pictures of a lake in summer where the water is that particular Midwest brown. And 3 pictures at the back, stuck together slightly like they had once been wet. Fog, seam, gray. I held one up to my face not to smell it this time, just to feel dumb and human and in control. And through the paper, just for a second, I thought I felt the faintest tug. Not my imagination, not the heating. A pull, like the kind you'd feel if you were holding one end of a thin rope and someone, far away, had just lifted the other end to ring a bell. If you're thinking of going out there because you live nearby or because you like the stories, I can't tell you not to. It's a patch of ground with old stones and a history people will argue about for another 100 years. It is not special the way a movie makes something special. It is special the way a place becomes a magnet for whatever you bring to it. If you go, bring respect. Bring a friend who thinks your jokes are funny. Bring a flashlight that doesn't need you. And when the woods give you a light, understand that it might be less a thing to look at and more a hand, and that hands always want to take you somewhere. I haven't thrown away the photograph in my glove compartment because throwing it away feels like an invitation. I also haven't shown it to anyone else. It rides with me. Sometimes I swear the corner curls up like it wants out. Sometimes I forget it's there until I hit a bump and the glove compartment clicks like a small bell being tapped. This isn't a warning. It's just what happened. You can tell yourself the noises are pipes and the shapes on film are smudges and the lights in the trees are kids with lantern apps. You can say the knocks were a raccoon. You can say 1963 is just a year. You can even say the rectangle was a software glitch because who really understands how cameras map heat? I say those things too out loud with my whole chest. It helps. But some nights when the city is quiet in the way it only is in the hour before the garbage trucks start, the bell somewhere very far away rings itself, steady and patient, and I breathe like the cold outside is already inside me, and I keep hoping that if I don't follow the sound won't follow me. I know how this is going to sound, and I get why people roll their eyes when Kansas kids bring up Stull. I did the same thing for years. The stories make it feel like the cemetery itself is standing behind you when someone mentions it. Gateway to hell, witches, midnight stares that aren't there during the day. I always thought it was a prank that got out of control sometime in the 80s and just never stopped, so I didn't go out there for thrills. I went because I owed a favor, and I didn't want my cousin to go alone. This was fall of 2011. I was 23, working the overnight shift at a distribution warehouse in Lawrence. On nights off, I slept late and drove aimlessly to shake the warehouse out of my bones. My cousin Eli was the opposite. Up at dawn, drywall installer almost always broke because he liked better beer than he could afford. His girlfriend had just moved down to Wichita for school, and he was moody in that way guys get where everything is a joke until it's not. One Friday, he called me at 10 p.m. and said, "You want to go look at a haunted church or are you scared?" I said, "I'm too tired to be scared." "Perfect," he said. "We'll take it easy." My friend Mariah's in. She brought a camera. I knew Mariah from high school. Quiet, observant, more likely to watch you than talk to you. She lived off Haskell, waitress nights. She said she wanted to shoot abandoned places to build a portfolio. "The ruined church out in Stull looks good even if it's all urban legend," she told me on the phone. "Just shapes and empty windows. If we go quick. We don't hop fences. We keep it respectful." That last part mattered to me. I've been to enough small-town cemeteries to know they belong to somebody. It's not just a backdrop for a dare. So we made rules, no yelling, no breaking anything, no walking on graves. If a sheriff's car pulled up, we'd apologize and leave. We met at a gas station on 10, the one with the sagging ice freezer and the bored clerk who looked like he's been leaning on that counter since the Dust Bowl. Eli's Honda was idling with that strangled rattle Hondas. Get when they both want and don't want to live. Mariah was in the passenger seat with a film camera in her lap, an old Canon taped in 2 places. She waved a little. I got in the back and we headed west, past the last stretch of strip malls and into the slow, flat dark. Night in the plains isn't like night in the city. In the city, darkness is cut up by light, the kind that makes shadows quick and sharp. Out there, darkness is a big thing that keeps happening and your headlights feel like a lie you're telling it. Cornfields slid by in a low hiss. Grain bins rose like soft metal moons. The Honda's dome light blinked on and off by itself whenever we hit a bump, which was every quarter mile, and Mariah smacked it with the back of her hand until it stopped. The radio found some station playing that old preacher style. Men with trembling voices promising that the hour was at hand. Eli turned it down and laughed. "Appropriate," he said. "We got to Stull without getting lost because you don't need directions out there. You go until the road narrows and the trees thicken, and then you know you're close. The closer you get, the more the stories wake up in your head." When we turned onto the road that runs by the cemetery, it felt like pulling into a place we didn't have any right to be. The moon was thin. The church ruin sat at the edge of the lot like a mouth missing too many teeth. There were no other cars. That surprised me. I think I expected kids crowded against the fence, somebody filming on a phone, the weird little festival you get at haunted places, everybody trying to outscare each other with less and less enthusiasm. But it was just us and wind that sometimes was wind and sometimes wasn't. Eli parked on the wide shoulder across from the church. We left the headlights off because we weren't there to make a scene. Mariah clicked off her seatbelt and said, "We do this fast. If we get any feeling that we shouldn't be here, we go." "Deal?" "Deal," I said. Eli was already out of the car. I remember how ordinary the gravel felt under our shoes. That detail sticks because it's the last normal thing I remember about that night. Crunch, crunch, like walking into a high school football game. The cemetery fence was waist high. The no trespassing sign was there. rusted, pockmarked with BBs. Eli put a hand on the top rail and looked at me like, "You going to talk me out of this?" I didn't. Mariah said, "We can shoot from outside. We don't have to go in." Which would have been fine. Then Eli said, "We're not wrecking anything," and swung a leg over. I followed. If I'm honest, I didn't want him to be on the inside of another fence without me. We moved careful and quiet. The gravestones were uneven, some broken, some leaned so far over it made you want to grab them and prop them up. The grass had that integer buzzy sound prairie grass gets when the wind combs it. The church was smaller than I expected. 4 walls, no roof, all the angles wrong. Years of cloud and heat had chewed it down until it looked tired of being a building. Mariah lifted the cannon. "One long exposure, then we go," she said. She set the camera on a stone and crouched behind it. In the viewfinder glow on her face, she looked younger, the way people do when they're concentrating. Eli stuck his head into the doorway of the church and said in a voice just above a whisper, "Anybody home?" The sound bounced around and came back flatter, as if it had lost weight in there. We didn't go inside. I want that clear. We stood outside the doorway, which was enough because once we were close, something that didn't belong to any of us crossed the line into the air around us. It was a pressure, like we'd gotten much higher in the mountains in the space of a second. My ears popped. Eli rubbed his jaw and said, "Huh," like he'd noticed a light flicker. "You feel that?" Mariah asked. I nodded. The smell came next. Not rotten eggs exactly, but hot dust after a hard rain with a bite under it like match smoke. "I think we should go," I said. "Give me 10 seconds, Mariah said. "Hold still. I'm doing the church." Wind slid past us and then stopped. Not died down, stopped like a door had been shut on it. Eli half smiled in the doorway like he was posing. The camera clicked. Mariah said, "Hold." And that's when something inside the church moved with the defeated patience of something heavy that had been asked to move many, many times. I didn't see anything at first. I heard the scrape, stone on stone. It came from the right-hand corner you couldn't see from the doorway. The sound drew a line down my spine. Eli jerked back a step. Mariah's finger twitched near the shutter and she made this little sound through her nose like she was trying to pick up a too-hot pot. "Hello?" Eli said. Not loud, not confident, but like a guy who thinks maybe it's a raccoon and wants to scare it off without making it angry. The scrape came again. It was less like something moving and more like something arriving. I reached for Eli's sleeve. "Man, let's go," I whispered. We didn't even... He started, and then we both saw it. Not a person. Not an animal. Not a shape I can put in a sentence and feel honest about. It was darker than the dark. That's an easy thing to say when you want to make a story sound spooky. But this was the flat, true kind of darker. The interior of the church was ordinary black. This was the kind of black that eats black. A shadow that didn't belong to anything but itself, pressed against the corner like a stain that had chosen to be vertical. It didn't step forward. It didn't lunge. It did something worse. It tilted as if noticing required a physical adjustment. The top edge of it pointed toward us. I thought of longhorn cattle for a second and felt childish for it. But the mind will put horns on anything if you let it, Mariah said very calmly, not moving the camera. "That's enough. We're leaving." She stood up too fast and the camera tipped. She saved it with the kind of dance step you only pull off when you're about to be embarrassed or terrorized. Eli took a slow step back. Another. The shadow didn't follow. What followed was weight. The air pressed down harder, like the inside of a plane when someone opens the cabin door and you're outside the math of it. The ground didn't shake exactly. It sighed downward as if settling bones. Dust lifted around our shoes and settled again. I know how that sounds. I know how much it hands the legend what it wants. But we all felt it, and I'll tell you how I know. We were suddenly all the same height, shoulder to shoulder like a team waiting for a whistle. None of us planned to stand like that. You only do that when you feel like the floor is a decision that can be taken away. We left. No last look. I tripped on the bottom rail of the fence and scraped my shin. Eli didn't make a joke. That more than anything made it real for me. He slid behind the wheel. Mariah got in the back with me. All of us stared straight ahead. When Eli turned the key, the Honda made a grinding sound it had never made before. He tried again. Third try, it turned over. The radio came back on by itself and found the preacher again. He was in the middle of a sentence, and the gate is narrow, and Eli hit the power like he'd swatted a fly. We didn't talk until we were on 59 heading south, because Eli said the highway felt safer, even though it added time. I pinched the cut on my shin and watched the blood make a slow dot through the hair on my leg. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to be the guy who says the stupid thing first and gives everybody else permission to panic. Mariah, of course, saved me from having to be brave. "Did you guys see a person?" she asked quietly. "Like a person. Not an animal. Not a trick of the moon." "No," Eli said. "I saw, the chalkboard at work?" He laughed once, short. "When somebody erases something but not all the way. I saw that, but without the board." I said, "I saw something turn toward us that didn't have to." We took Mariah home first because she lived closest. The dome light came on and stayed on and wouldn't shut off. She dug in her bag and handed me a roll of black and white film. "Keep this," she said to me, not Eli. "If you get weird about anything, call me." "What do you mean, weird?" I asked. "Like waking up with dirt in your bed?" she said. And then she looked like she wished she'd kept that to herself. "Forget I said that. It's from a story, just call me." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "Sure," I said. "If I wake up with a sandbox, you're the first person I tell." I went home. I took a shower that lasted longer than it needed to, because the sound and steam made my brain feel ordinary again. I crawled into bed and watched the red numbers on my cheap digital clock click over toward 3. When the $100 feeling in my chest finally unclenched, I fell asleep like a bag of rocks. I woke up with grit between my teeth. If you've ever gotten a mouthful of sand at a beach, you know the taste: dry, boring, ancient. I sat straight up and gagged and spat and watched a little spray of dust hit the wall. I thought I was still dreaming until my hand touched the sheet and came away with a smudge on my fingertips. I turned on the lamp. There was dirt on the fitted sheet at the foot of the bed. Not a lot. Not like somebody had dumped a plant pot. Enough to be undeniable. There were tiny bits of root in it, like somebody had shaved the lawn into crumbs. Your mind runs through ordinary first. I thought of my shoes. I thought of the pants I'd kicked off and left inside out at the end of the bed. I thought maybe I'd rolled over, caught the pant leg, shook dirt loose. I changed the sheets. I vacuumed the mattress with my creaky old Hoover. I brushed my teeth and joked at myself in the mirror. Look at you, haunted by lawn clippings. Then I went to the kitchen to make coffee and found a thin skipping trail of the same dirt from the back door to the sink. I live alone. The back door was locked. The lock sits loose in a way I've been meaning to fix for 5 years. If someone had come in, I would have noticed, right? People notice. They notice I called Eli. He didn't pick up. That wasn't unusual. He keeps his phone on silent because it makes him feel like his life is his. I texted, "You get home okay?" Then, because I wanted to pretend I was a different person than I am, I added, "Find any weird dirt, lol." He texted back an hour later. "I had a dream I drowned in a well. Water tasted like pennies. Woke up sore like somebody had been pushing on my chest. I didn't like that at all. Forget stall," I wrote. "Let's say we went to a Dairy Queen." "Deal," he wrote. Mariah called that afternoon. "I developed the film from last night," she said. "You want to come by?" I did. I didn't want to be alone in the apartment anymore because every sound had a slow tail on it, like it was rehearsing being a different sound if I turned my head. Mariah lived in a narrow place with a Murphy bed and nail holes in the walls from prints she hadn't hung yet. She had the strips of negatives clipped to a twine line across her kitchen like makeshift bunting. On the table were the prints. The church looked like it had in person, which should have made me feel better. "Do you see anything?" she asked. Not in the breathless way people ask when they want to be right, but like she needed a handle to grab. "In that corner," I said, pointing, even as a part of me wished I hadn't. "It's darker." "Yeah," she said, frowning, "but dark in a way I can't print. Like it ate light. When I dodged that spot under the enlarger, everything else came up, but not that corner. It stayed stuck." She handed me one of the prints. It was the shot from the doorway, the long exposure. Eli's outline was a blur where he'd turned to leave. I was a shape angled like my hand had just reached for him. The doorway itself was a rectangle flanked with stone. Inside the right-hand corner was a patch of black that looked like a printer error. A rough, awkward square. If you'd shown me that picture without any story, I would have said the negative had been scratched. But it wasn't a scratch. It didn't have edges. It had the kind of smear you get if you try to draw something you don't want to be drawing. "I also got this," she said, and slid over a normal-looking shot of the outside of the church. If I wasn't already uneasy, I would have liked it. The grass bent away from the stone foundation like the building had a gravity. On the far left edge of the frame, beyond the fence, a figure stood with its back to us. It could have been a person walking a dog on the road. It could have been a trick of the grass. It could have been nothing. The longer I looked, the more wrong it seemed. There was no blur to it. Everything else in the frame breathed a little from camera shake. That figure was crisp and stubborn. It wasn't wearing a hat, but if you wanted it to be wearing one, your eyes would allow it. That was after we left, Mariah said. I shot it from the car. I didn't see the person when I took it. Could be anybody, I said, because I thought that was what she wanted to hear. Yeah. She swallowed. Could be. I brought the print home with me. I didn't want to. I also didn't want it to be anywhere I wasn't. The dirt came again that night, more of it. The sort of amount you'd notice even if you were in the kind of hurry where your shirt is inside out, and you only find out when someone at work points it out. It was in the sink. It was on the tile by the tub. It was in a line on the dresser that traced the path my wallet takes when I toss it there. I vacuumed. I shook the rug on the landing. The guy in the apartment across the hall opened his door in his socks and said, "We don't shake rugs, man." Like he was practicing being annoyed about something normal instead of something else. "Sorry," I said. "Got dirt. From where?" he asked, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. I slept on the couch. I didn't want to, but the bed felt like a mouth waiting to close. At around 2, I half woke to what I thought was rain. It wasn't. It was the sound of something sifting through something fine. I lay there listening like a kid listens to a noise they know is the house settling, until the noise goes on too long. The sound was coming from the bedroom. I sat up. The couch springs made that surrendering squeak they only make at night. The sifting stopped as if it had heard me listening. You want me to say I got up? I want to say I got up. I didn't. I stayed on the couch and stared at the dark kitchen and counted seconds like counting them could pin them in place. Somewhere between 4 and 5 I slept. When I woke, there was a small hill of dirt on the bed where a person's chest would be if they were lying on their back. That broke whatever part of me believes in a reasonable explanation first. I put my shoes on. I called Eli and said, "Where are you?" "On a job," he said, voice mean with tired. "You okay?" "Can we meet tonight?" "Mariah too," he said. "She called me. She's not sleeping either. She said she heard something when she was in the shower. She said she thought someone breathed against the curtain. I told her it was steam. She said steam doesn't lean. We met at the same gas station at 9. The same clerk was behind the counter, mustache t-shirt that said people in hell want ice water, which was either a joke or not. He eyed our coffee and said, "Headed out to the devil's driveway?" "Just getting caffeine," Eli said. The clerk nodded once like he was not in the mood to pretend. People go out there thinking they're going to see something and come back disappointed. Or they don't see anything and then they see it here later, he said, tapping the counter. "What do you mean here?" I asked. "In their beds," he said. "In the kitchen sink. In the spot where their feet swing out in the morning. Dirt," he added, like he'd been making a note and wanted it recorded accurately. "Don't go back out there. That's my free advice. Free advice is worth what it costs." "We weren't planning to," Mariah said, which was true. We weren't. We wanted to do the opposite of that. It didn't matter. Eli said we should tell someone, and I laughed in a way I didn't want to. Tell who? A priest? A cop? "Hey, officer, we committed a misdemeanor and now our apartments are dirty." One thing about being a person who pretends to be brave is that it doesn't occur to you until you need help that you have built your house out of not asking for it. We decided to tell Deputy something if we saw one, which is what you say when you don't plan to, and drove back into town. That night I stripped the bed down to the mattress and slept on the bare foam. It made me feel like I was camping inside my own bedroom, which I liked in a stupid way. I woke up to a smear on the foam in the shape of a palm. Pressed once, lifted, leaving 5 commas of damp. I put the mattress on the curb by 9 a.m. and called my boss to say I had food poisoning because the devil tracked soil into my life. Didn't feel like it would get me paid. I walked to a thrift store on 23rd and bought a bed frame I could carry with help if I ever needed to, which I did. I dragged it home and set it up in the living room under the ceiling fan that clicks like a metronome when it's trying to say, "You're not alone even when you are, it wasn't just me." Eli texted a photo of his tub. It looked like somebody had filled it with muddy water and then drained it. There was a ring 2 inches up, perfect all the way around like a circle drawn with a compass. "I didn't take a bath," he wrote. "I shower because I'm a man of the future." Mariah left me a voicemail that afternoon. She didn't say hello. She said somebody knocked on my door. I thought it was UPS because you know how they knock weird like they're already walking away. But when I opened it, there was this old man standing there like he belonged. He said, "You brought something back that doesn't like to be seen." Then he smiled and added, "It'll stop when it knows you know it's there." I asked him who he was. He said, "I live near churches that don't." And he started laughing. Not mean, just like something was finally funny again. He looked past me into the apartment and said, "You don't have a lot of houseplants." "That's good." And then he left. I watched from the peephole. He didn't go down the stairs. He didn't go up. I opened the door again 20 seconds later and the hall was empty. So that's my day. We didn't go back to Stull. The 3 of us got together instead at my apartment all in daylight. We had a plan. No more talking about it, no more feeding it with attention. That was hard. Not because we wanted to be dramatic, but because it permeates your boring errands. You mop with more care than you've ever mopped. You start washing your feet before bed like it's a ritual. You buy a plant and then panic that you've invited the wrong kind of dirt. At night, it shifted form. Sometimes it was just the grit again, like someone had emptied their pockets out on my pillow. Once it was the smell, hot wet stone, sharp like a match. Once it was a sound like something dragging something over wood, even though my floors are laminate. It didn't try to be more frightening than it needed to be. It had the confidence of something that knows you'll wake up. After a week, the dirt got bored of being dirt. That's the only way I can say it. It chose a new game. My front door would be unlocked in the morning. Not open, not ajar, unlocked. I live alone. I lock the door as a habit that feels like breathing. The first time I told myself I forgot. The second time I told myself I'd been distracted. The third time I said it out loud to the empty apartment. No, like I was correcting a dog that wasn't there. The fourth time I slept with a chair under the knob. The fifth time the chair didn't matter. I called the landlord and told him the lock was shot. He came with a new deadbolt and a drill and small talk. He was halfway through telling me how you have to paint the edge of a door with a razor in old buildings, so the humidity doesn't turn it into a stubborn idiot. When he glanced up at the top corner of the frame, frowned and said, "Huh? What?" I asked. He leaned closer. He was short enough that he had to stand on his toes to get a better look, which would have been funny in a different life. "You got a lot of dust up here," he said. "What have you been drilling?" "I've been not doing that," I said. He dragged his finger across the top of the frame. It came away black like he'd rubbed a candle wick. "Soot?" he asked himself, then shook his head because there isn't a fireplace anywhere in the building. He installed the new lock. It clicked with a tight, clean sound that made me feel about 7% better. He wiped his hands on his jeans and said, "Keep it locked," and then laughed at his own joke. I locked the door behind him and checked it 3 times before I could convince my brain to stop being a rabbit. That night, around midnight, which I know because the ceiling fan clicks change speed by microdegrees at midnight when the power company plays with the grid, and I'm sensitive to things I didn't know you could be sensitive to. I woke up in the living room to the old preacher on the radio. The radio was off. It still was. The voice wasn't in the room exactly. It was to the left of the room, which is where the wall is, which is where my neighbor's place starts. Except I'd been living in that apartment for 4 years, and I had never, not once, heard anything in that tone from that side. The voice said, muffled as if it had cotton in its throat, "And the gate is narrow." And then I heard a sound I cannot put here without wondering what will follow it through the letters. A dragging sound, not footfalls, something heavy being convinced to be somewhere else. I sat up. I didn't breathe. My chest had that locked shut feeling you get when you've been laughing too hard, but my face wasn't smiling. The sound moved down the wall toward the door. Then it was at the door. You can know where a sound is in a room in an animal way that has nothing to do with acoustics and everything to do with being prey. It was at the door the way a person is at a door, slow, curious, sure of itself. When the knocking came, it was polite. 3 knocks spaced out in a rhythm that said, "I'll wait." It was a human knock, but there was no shape under the door. No shadow moving where the light from the hall breaks in. Only the 3rd knock made the chain rattle, like something on the other side had put its weight forward. There are two reasons people look through peepholes: to open up or to talk themselves out of it. I looked. For a second I saw nothing. Then the peephole went black. Not like someone's eye is against it. Like somebody stuck a thumb over it. The voice that wasn't mine in my head said, "Don't you dare." I did not open the door. "Who is it?" I asked, and my voice cracked like it was 14 again. Nothing. Then a laugh. Not the kind of laugh you hear on a tape recorder in a story and it turns out it's crickets. A laugh like a person who has told a joke that isn't for you to get. Then, after a breath so close I could feel the door breathe back against the frame, a whisper right at the seam. "You know." I held the chair under the handle and leaned my whole weight against it until my legs shook the way they do when you've carried something too far and too long. After what felt like an hour and 20 seconds, silence fell from a height. I didn't move. At around 3, my phone buzzed with a text from Eli. "Knocking?" I texted back, "Yes." He wrote, "3?" I wrote, "Yes." He wrote, "I'm not opening." I wrote, "Me either." In the morning, I looked at the door. The new deadbolt was still thrown. The chain was in place. The lock plate around the knob had dust on it that had not been there the night before. Black dust. I got a damp paper towel and wiped it and felt like I was doing something obscene. The three of us met again. We were gray under the eyes in a way makeup doesn't fix. Mariah said. The old man came back. She was stirring her coffee clockwise like she'd been paid to. He didn't knock. I saw him through my peephole like he wants to be seen but never wants to be found. I opened the door. He was standing there holding my photo. "What photo?" I asked. "The one of the church," she said. He said, "This doesn't show it." "You know that. Cameras don't do the kind of seeing that helps." I said, "Who are you?" He said a full name like people used to say them when there were fewer people to say them among. First, middle, last, and I felt tired all at once, like I'd heard something polite and inevitable. Then he said, "You should stop changing your sheets for a while." I said, "That's disgusting." He said, "It wants you to show you know. You can't clean someone out of your house if you keep pretending they were never in it." "What did you do?" Eli asked. "I didn't change my sheets," she said. "For a week?" And the dirt stopped. Eli and I stared at her. It's hard to explain, but there it was. I had been scrubbing my apartment like a crime scene, as if evidence was the problem. The idea of not cleaning made me itch. But that night, when the grit came back on the pillow, I left it. The next morning, there was less of it. I didn't like what that implied. The night after, there was a thin gray thumbprint above the headboard where the thumb would be if someone stood behind the bed and reached out just to prove a point. I didn't wipe it. After 3 days of living like that, something in the apartment shifted into a different gear. The sound moved down the hall once at 2 in the morning and never came back. The dirt thinned to a suggestion. The smell faded from match head to rain on dust to nothing. I would like to tell you that was the end. I would like to tell you we did something brave together and won. If this were a video, this is where the narrator would cut to a clip of a church and say, "And to this day," with a little smile like he doesn't believe his own story. This isn't that. I didn't go back to Stoll. Neither did Eli. Mariah moved a year later to Denver, where the air is thinner and the light different and you can tell yourself that's why you sleep better. And we still text once in a while straight-faced markdowns of absurd things. Knocking? Nope. Dirt? Just outside. Last summer I woke up with that feeling you get sometimes that someone is in the room. It was worse because it wasn't from a dream. I was staring at the ceiling fan and I knew. Before I turned my head, I knew where it would be. That was the worst part, being right. The door to the bedroom, yes, I'd moved back to the bedroom. You can't live in a living room forever, was mostly closed. There was a hand wrapped over the edge. Just the first 2 knuckles, like somebody was peeking in and held themselves back with the rest of their body around the corner. The fingers were too long. Not cartoon long. Just a little too much. It wasn't a real hand or an unreal hand. It was an idea of a hand. I didn't get up. I didn't blink. I watched the hand for what my brain decided was a very long time. And then I slept from fear the way people faint. In the morning, there was nothing at the door. There was a smudge on the paint where fingers would be if they were reaching around and someone had told them not to. If you come to Kansas, you'll be tempted to go out there. I won't tell you not to. I don't have that kind of authority. And people shouldn't tell other people which rooms to stand outside. If you go, don't be loud. Don't be cruel to the stones. Don't pretend the place only exists when you've got your phone up. If the air goes heavy and your ears pop and you smell something like hot dust and old matches, that's your cue to go. You can walk away from the church and think you left the story there, stuck to the rock and the grass. Here's what I tell myself and then fail to believe. There isn't a gate. There isn't a ladder down. There isn't a hole that opens at midnight and waits for you to look. There's only a corner in a broken room where the dark has had more practice being dark than you've had being brave, and sometimes the dark notices you noticed it. That's all. If you wake up later and there's dirt in your bed, just a little, the kind you could wipe away with your palm but don't. Don't scrub it out the first time. Look at it and let it sit like you would with any gift you didn't ask for. If there's a knock 3 spaced apart, don't open. If you look through the peephole and the world goes black, you are very much awake. If you go weeks without so much as a dusting on the dresser and you think, finally, that was a phase, good. I am glad for you, but don't be surprised if one night, out of nowhere, you hear something on the far side of a wall that should be empty, something dragging something, followed by the old preacher's voice through a radio that isn't on, saying, "And the gate is narrow," like a reminder he gives to people who like to step over fences. Last week I changed my sheets. Clean white, crisp, it felt like daring. I slept like a nail hammered all the way in. I woke up, stretched, and laughed at nothing because it felt good to be stupid and alive. Then my heel brushed against the foot of the bed and there was that sound again, soft, trickling. And I knew before I looked that my feet had made a small slide in grit that hadn't been there when I closed my eyes. I sat on the edge of the bed and put my hands on my knees and stared at the floor until the sun came through the blinds and turned the dust visible. If you ask me now whether I believe in a gateway to hell, I'll tell you no. It isn't a doorway. It isn't a place. It's an attention. It's the pressure that gathers in a ruined corner when 3 kids lean into the threshold of something that's tired of being looked at. It's a shadow that doesn't need to move to arrive. It's the dirt that knows your sheets better than it should. That's all I have. If you think I'm making it up, I hope you're right. If you think there's a way to end it, don't tell me. I'm not sure I want to know which part of me is the part it would need to go through. I'll do what the old man said. I'll let it know I know. I'll change the sheets when I can't stand it and wait when I can. And when the knocking comes, I'll pretend I don't hear it until it decides I mean it. And if it decides I don't, then I guess I'll start sleeping on the couch again, with the fan clicking overhead, counting the spaces between the knocks and trying not to wonder what happens if I run out of numbers. My name's Alex, and I used to drive nights for a rideshare company around Chicago. If you've got the app, you've maybe seen my car on the little map, cruising up and down Archer Avenue, past the quiet industrial yards and the empty diners with the red neon coffee cups in the window. Nights were my thing, not just because the money was better, but because I liked the city when it pulled its shoulders in, when the streetlights ate the edges of everything. Back then I was 28, splitting rent with my friend Maya in a 2-bedroom near Midway. She worked early mornings at the airport, so our lives barely overlapped except for that dead hour between her alarms and my pillow. If you're from here, you probably already know about Resurrection Cemetery. If you're not, picture a long stretch of road that runs past weathered brick bungalows and half-lit taverns, then suddenly opens into a dark sea of headstones and old oaks. The iron gates are tall and cold. In the day you can see the green patina where the paint has flaked off. At night they look like a pair of black teeth. When I first started driving that way, every third passenger would mention Resurrection Mary like it was an inside joke. Sometimes they'd point and laugh, sometimes they'd get quiet. People love a ghost story that belongs to their city. It's like having bragging rights over your own fear. I didn't think much of it until the night the app pinged me for a pickup a little after 1 a.m., not far from the old ballroom site. It was late fall, one of those nights when your breath comes out in little steam ghosts. I rolled up to the pin and killed my high beam so I didn't blind whoever was waiting. At first I thought no one was there, but then I saw her. Standing just beyond the streetlight, a young woman in a pale dress, coat draped over her shoulders like she'd put it on while walking. She was slim, dark hair pinned low, chin tucked into her scarf. The map put her destination as an address near Summit, residential quiet streets. Nothing weird. When she opened the passenger door, the interior light made her squint. She didn't get in right away. Do you mind if I sit in the back?" she asked, soft voice polite. Her fingers pinched the coat closed at her throat. "Sure," I said. "It's warmer back there. The vents are better." I smiled so she knew I wasn't messing with her, but her expression didn't change. She moved like she was careful not to be seen moving, if that makes sense. Economical steps. Like she was crossing a stage during someone else's performance. When she settled into the back seat, a smell came with her. Old flowers, maybe lilacs. It was faint and clean, the way a closed closet smells. I tapped the start ride button and pulled out. The radio was low. She looked out the window past her own reflection, toward the black shape of the cemetery fence sliding by. "You doing okay?" I asked after a minute. "You need to warm up more?" "I can bump the heat, I'm fine," she said.
Thank you. Her voice had that careful edge to it.
Chicago. But from a different time, like you hear on those old VHS tapes your parents keep in a box. I kept driving. The wipers creaked every so often across dry glass because it looked like snow but wasn't. "My boyfriend doesn't like when I take rides at night," she said after a while. "He worries." "That's fair," I said. "It's late. He says the roads are mean," she said. Then she laughed, quick and light. "That's a funny thing to say, right? Mean roads." She touched the window with the tips of her gloves and left no smudge. We passed the cemetery gates. Even in the dark they catch your eye. Something about the geometry of them. The way the bars rise. Each topped with a spike, the way the pillars lean in. Like they're listening. "That's resurrection," I said without thinking, just filling the car with sound. "You know the story?" She looked at the gate so hard I thought she might ask me to stop. "Everybody knows it," she said. We didn't talk much after that. She gave a small direction once to take the turn by the wooded strip instead of the main intersection. It was shorter and empty, and felt like driving through a pocket of air colder than the rest. I figured she was someone's kid sister who'd got a ride home from a party, and the friend bailed, leaving her to the app. When we hit her street, she leaned forward, resting her hand on the back of my seat to point. "Here," she said. "Just pull up by the lamp." There was a house with a porch light left on the way my parents used to do for me when I stayed out too late. She said, "Thank you," and I said, "No problem," and she added, "Do you have change?" Which made me smile because who carries cash, and then I remembered I had someone's for tolls. She paid me in quarters anyway. 3 silver circles pressed into my palm like she didn't want her skin to touch mine. Then she was out, walking fast up the path, coat still pinched shut. I watched her climb the few steps. Before I pulled away, I glanced at the mirror. She wasn't at the door. The porch light was on, the steps were clear, and there was a faint fog on my back window where her breath had been a minute ago. I thought, she probably went around to a side door. I thought, don't be a creep staring at some girl's house. I drove away. When I got home, Maya had left out leftover empanadas from the little place on 63rd. She was already asleep, the TV whispering in her room. I ate at the counter. The quarters were still in my pocket. I set them on the counter without thinking. One landed on its edge and wobbled a long time before lying flat. The smell of lilac lingered in the coat I'd shrugged back on to grab the food from the fridge, and I figured it was hers, a perfume that stuck to everything it touched for a little while. The next night, I worked the same route. The app sent me up Archer again after midnight. It was colder, a wind that made the stop signs twang. I picked up a guy in a Bears beanie from a bar I'd never seen open in daylight. He got in reeking of beer and ancient peanuts and put his forearm on the back of my seat. "You ever see her?" he asked. "Who?" I said, just because pretending not to know reassures drunk people. "The girl," he said. "The one with the dress. The one that's always late to get home." He laughed, then sobered. My grandpa swore he picked her up way back. She said, "Drop me at the gates," and he said, "That's creepy," and she laughed, and then he wasn't laughing because she wasn't there when he looked again. "There are a lot of stories," I said. "Yeah, well, there's always a lot of stories," he said, and fell asleep. I dropped him at a building where every window had a different color curtain like a patchwork quilt. The third night, I recognized the ping location right away. Same corner, same streetlight, same dark. I told myself I'd gotten used to that route and the app knew it. I turned down my radio. When I coasted to the curb, she was there. Same coat, same careful stance, like she wanted to be smaller than she was. When the door handle clicked, a chill slid over me even with the heat on. She got in the back and shut the door softly. The smell of lilacs again, stronger, like it had been waiting in the car. "Hey," I said, and heard my own voice as if from the end of a hallway. "Could you take Archer?" she asked. "The same way. Sorry." "Sure," I said. "Thank you," she said. and the word hung there like she had just learned to say it. We passed the gates. The road was empty. Every reflector shone back at us like an eye. I checked the mirror, not because I was trying to be a jerk, but because some part of me needed to know she was there. She was. She had her head tipped, watching the cemetery like she recognized the stones. "Do you ever walk?" I asked. "At night?" "I mean, for air, sometimes," she said, "when no one is looking." "How come?" I said, "Because," she said, "there are places you only see when no one's looking." That answer lodged under my skin. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do, and then I stopped because her face in the mirror didn't match my laugh. This is going to sound weird, but it was too still. Like she had practiced the idea of sitting in a car without practicing how to breathe while doing it. The back window steamed where her breath would have been, but the steam didn't pulse or shift. It just fogged, then cleared, then fogged again, like someone pushing their sleeve against the glass on a loop. When we got to her street, I slowed. She leaned forward to point to the lamp again, and I flinched. Her hand was close to my shoulder, and it was so cold the hair lifted on my neck. She saw me react and pulled back like she was embarrassed. "Sorry," she said. She touched the door handle. Would you mind dropping me by the cemetery one night? Sometime I need to leave flowers. For a friend?" "Sure," I said, because what else do you say when someone asks like that? "Not tonight, though." "They locked the gates." "I know," she said. "They always do." She left 3/4 again. When she was gone, my back seat had the faintest indent, like a child had rested there. It smoothed out slowly while I watched, as if the cushion was remembering its own shape. I looked at the porch light. It was on. I looked at the door. It stayed closed. I pulled away and drove aimlessly until the app offered me a ride in a part of town with more noise, more proof of other people. I told Maya about her over coffee the next afternoon. She yawned and patted my hand. "You picked up Resurrection Mary," she said, like she was telling me I'd found a penny. "She paid in quarters," I said. "Sure she did," Maya said, and got up to get dressed for work. "It's a good story, Al. You should post it. People eat that stuff up." She kissed my hair as she walked past. "Stay on the well-lit streets, okay?" I tried, I really did. But it's the strangest thing. When the app pings you, it's like the sound points your nose. That weekend the bars were full. Payday glow around everyone. I thought I'd spend the night bouncing around the loop, but around midnight, the map tugged me south again. Archer was dark. The cemetery fence ran along to my left like a railroad track. That's when I saw the flash of white at the edge of my headlights, a shape where the shoulder dipped. I slowed by instinct. The figure was slight, standing with its back to the road, head bowed, arms folded over the chest as if bracing for wind. I pulled onto the shoulder and rolled down the passenger window halfway. "You okay?" I called. It felt like a stupid thing to yell into the night. She turned. Her face was in shadow under the streetlight. "Can you take me just a little ways? Just to the gates." I don't know why I let her in. Maybe because saying no would have felt like throwing someone into a river and watching them go. She got in without the interior light flicking on. The lilac smell swarmed the cabin so strong I tasted it. I pulled back onto the road and drove 15 seconds, that's all. To the gates that everyone recognizes. They looked different up close without the day to soften them. The spikes were sharper. The chain that loops them at night had been removed. Someone must have been in there late, a caretaker or a gravedigger. The space between the gates was a narrow mouth. "Here's fine," she said, and her voice had that quick edge again, the way a voice sounds when the body around it is shivering. "Thank you. Want me to wait?" I asked. She looked at me. Her eyes were very clear, the way brown eyes get when the whites are red. "You could," she said, "but I'm not sure you will." She slid out before I could say anything. I watched her go through the space between the gates and cross the path inside. Quick steps, but not hurrying exactly. More like she knew how far she had to go and felt that distance like a weight. I don't know how long I sat there. It couldn't have been more than a minute. The wind was picking up, a hollow sound around the car. I looked at the time and told myself that if she wasn't back in 2 minutes, I'd call someone. Not the police, not at first. Maybe the cemetery office, the number on the sign. Before I could make my mind up, a truck came over the rise behind me, a semi hauling something tall and covered. It blew by in the left lane, horn rumbling in that way that vibrates your ribs. That's when I heard it, the scream. It didn't come from the truck. It came from inside the cemetery. Deep, and I don't mean deep like underground. I mean deep like the sound had to reach up a long way to get out. It was a woman screaming, but it was also something else, a tearing sound, like wind being pulled through cloth. I froze, every part of me froze. The truck's taillights swam away and took their sound with them, and the scream roped itself around the inside of my car, thin at the edges and wide in the middle. I fumbled with the seatbelt and opened my door without remembering to unlock it. Cold hit my knees. The road was empty. The gates were open. A figure was moving fast on the path inside, white against the dark. I think I yelled something. I think I cried out her name even though I didn't know it. She came out through the gate and stopped like there was a line on the ground she couldn't cross without help. Her hair was loose now, blowing across her face. "I'm sorry," she said as if she had done something wrong. "I'm sorry, I didn't know he'd be there." "Who?" I said without thinking, like an idiot asking the ocean to be more specific. She looked past me, over my shoulder, not at the road, not at anything in this direction, but back toward the headstones that made the darkness lumpier. "He waits when it's cold," she said in a voice that wasn't hers, flat and low and far away. "He waits by the place where the ground swells. He waits by the gates when they're open." A second scream folded over the first, closer, so close I looked behind me like an animal would. There was nobody there. The wind hit the iron bars and made them hum, a low vibrating tone that joined with whatever I'd heard to make something like a chord a human throat shouldn't be able to sing. "Get in the car," I said. My voice cracked. "Please," she did. When she shut the door, the sound dimmed like someone had put a pillow over it. I gunned the engine and fishtailed a little, tires squealing on cold asphalt. We shot forward. When we were a block away, I realized I was breathing wrong, shallow and fast like I'd been running in my dreams. I swallowed hard and forced the breaths deeper. The smell of lilacs had turned sour, like water left in a vase too long. She didn't speak for a while. Neither did I. Finally, I said, "Do you want me to take you home?" She shook her head. "No," she said. "I don't think so." "Where then?" She pressed her glove to the glass and left no mark. "Anywhere," she said. "Just not here." We drove. It felt like a long time and also no time at all. When I realized I'd driven to Summit again, like muscle memory had steered for me, she said, "The lamp," and I pulled over by the same pole that leaned a little, with the same ring of dead bugs at its base like a shadow. This time she didn't move right away. She leaned forward, her voice more human again, more here. Could you? She stopped. "Do you have paper?" "I'll write it down." I handed her an old receipt from a gas station. She held it like it might break. "You can't," she said, and then she didn't finish that sentence either. She wrote a number. Not a full number, just 7 digits. Old school. No area code. Then a name that looked like a loop that got tired halfway through. She pushed the paper back to me. "If you need to talk again," she said. "I'll try to be there." She got out. I watched her go. The porch light was off. The street was quiet. Only when she was halfway up did the light pop on, late like it had been thinking about it. She didn't turn at the door this time. She didn't do anything I could put a finger on. She reached for the handle and the door swung inward. I waited for it to shut. It didn't. For a half-breath, the open door sliced the light into a shape I can still draw with my eyes closed. Then the doorway was just doorway again, and if there had been anyone there at all, she was part of the house now, or the night. I didn't sleep that morning. I sat at the table with the 7 numbers and the half name and the 3/4, stacked now without me remembering stacking them, and I felt like I had brought something home that belonged outside. Around 9, Maya came in and poured coffee and looked at me over the mug. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said, because she's the kind of person who can't help the line even when she doesn't mean to say it. "Maybe," I said. She sat. "Tell me," I told her about the scream. She went pale in patches, like her skin couldn't be scared all at once. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Maybe she's a real girl and there's some creep following her. Maybe she's..." She didn't finish. "Alex, take this to the cops." "At least tell them the street," I did. I went to the district station like a guy bringing a stray dog he can't keep. The desk officer was kind in the automatic way people are when they don't believe you, but they see you believe yourself. He took notes. He wrote, "Possible domestic disturbance and Resurrection Cemetery, Archer and female, approx 20s, white dress." He didn't roll his eyes. I respected him for that awful small thing. That evening, around dusk, my phone lit up with a number that was missing 3 digits. I'd never seen that before. It rang like it meant to keep ringing until I picked up. I did. "Hello?" At first, all I heard was the hollow wind of a road. Then a woman's voice, not her, older. "Who is this?" the voice said. "You keep calling my house, asking for. The voice caught. "Who is this?" "I'm sorry," I said automatically, because that's what your mouth does before your brain catches up. "I don't think I called anyone." My call history showed no outgoing calls since the cops. "I have your number on my caller ID," the woman said. And then, because the universe likes to add a detail to make you think you're losing it, she read the last 4 digits of a number I'd had 5 years ago. The line went quiet. Then she said, very small, "You're not funny," and hung up. I stared at the screen until it went black and my own face stared back. Hair pushed up wrong, eyes too bright. On my break, I went to the cemetery in daylight. It was a Sunday. Families walked slow, kids weaving the way kids do even when you tell them to be respectful. There were balloons tied to a stone with "Happy Birthday, Daddy" written on them. There were candles in red glass cups, half melted and stuck to the ground. The gates were open and the iron was cold even in the sun. On one bar, low and to the left, there was a handprint in the paint where the color had bubbled like something hot touched it and then cooled. I know people say kids did that as a prank. I know people say a lot of things. I pressed my palm there and it covered mine exactly. A groundskeeper watched me and gave the softest nod, like he'd seen this exact posture 100 times. I walked in. I didn't go far. I didn't want to. I stood where the road curves by the big maple and listened for a sound I would never admit I wanted to hear. I heard birds. I heard a plane heading into Midway. I heard the mutter of a truck out on Archer. No screams, no music. Just the sound trees make when they move their leaves past each other. On my way back to the car, I saw a man leaning on the hood of his pickup, smoking. He looked like an uncle. Barbecue-stained Windy City hoodie, scuffed boots. "You drive nights?" he asked, flicking ash. "Yeah," I said. "Everyone always knows somehow." "You see things you don't want to, you call over Channel 19, he said. "Trucker CB, you'll catch someone who's up. You'll catch me." "Name's Stan." He tapped his chest twice like it was his name tag. "You keep away from the gates after midnight. The road gets mean." I wanted to ask him how he knew that exact phrase, but he had already turned to watch a family carry a folding chair back to their car. For a couple of weeks, nothing. I avoided Archer after 11 without deciding to. The app would ping and I'd let it time out. Maya teased me, then stopped teasing me when she realized the joke didn't land. We got a second deadbolt for the apartment, even though neither of us said we were scared of anything except last year's water bill. Then one Tuesday, just before dawn, my dashcam app sent me a notification. It had uploaded a clip to the cloud, motion activated. I hadn't been in the car since midnight. I opened the clip. It was grainy, black and white. The car was parked on 55th. You could see the street light and past it the cemetery fence a block away. Everything looks closer on those cameras. At 13 seconds, a figure moved across the back seat frame from left to right. Not a person. Not exactly. A white shape like when you breathe onto glass and then drag your hand through the breath. The shape paused at the center of the frame where the back seat is, like it was sitting for a second. Then it slid out of the frame. The clock on the video said 3:17 a.m. There was no sound. I didn't show Maya. I deleted the clip. Then I emptied the deleted folder. My hands shook like I'd drunk 4 Red Bulls after. The car smelled like lilac so strong I cracked the windows in a 30-degree wind. The next night I went early, before the bars closed, thinking I'd beat whatever clock I'd wound by accident. The roads were crowded, the good busy. I started to feel stupid for letting a story rent space in my head. Then I got a ping at Archer and Roberts. A pickup at the shoulder near the dark stretch. I hovered my thumb over Deanie. I don't know why I didn't press it. Maybe because I was tired of being afraid of a road. I pulled up. Nobody there. I waited the grace period, then another minute because the idea of leaving felt like an insult to something I didn't want to insult. The radio fizzed. I reached to turn it off and heard beneath the static a voice. Very soft, singing, humming really, a slow dance tune I recognized from those Songs of the 30s CDs my grandmother used to play at Thanksgiving. The sound wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from the air in the car. Like the way a seashell holds ocean, my car held that humming for those exact seconds and then let it go. "Okay," I said out loud. To no one. To someone. "Okay." I tapped end right. I drove to the cemetery. I don't know why. The gates were closed, chain looped with a city padlock lacquering it together. My headlights lit the bars. My phone in the cup holder buzzed once. Unknown number. I shouldn't have picked up. I did. Hello? Nothing. Then a breath. The specific sound of a person holding the phone so the microphone rests against their lip. Mary? I said, finally saying the name I had avoided because once you use a name, you invite it. The line crackled. A whisper so soft I almost missed it. Don't call me that. The phone went dead. I sat there until another truck came over the rise and I realized I had made myself a dark, stopped thing on a fast road. I went home. I locked both deadbolts. I slept the way you sleep when your body forces you to. Months went by. Winter went out and back again like it had forgotten something. People got engaged, broke up, got new jobs, got fired. Maya moved in with her girlfriend, Erin. And I took the smaller bedroom and didn't mind. I stopped driving nights as much. I told myself the money wasn't worth it, but really I didn't want to see the gates. I took daytime airport runs, suburban moms with 4 suitcases and a toddler asleep on her lap. Sometimes, usually on the bus or in line at the grocery store. I took the paper with the 7 digits out of my wallet. I don't know why I kept it. Half the ink had smudged. I tried adding area codes in my head like that could solve a human being. I tried not to imagine calling and hearing that scream. I tried not to imagine the house with the porch light. Then early spring, I was sitting with Stan the trucker at a diner on Harlem that opens at 5 and never seems to close. He'd invited me after we'd waved at each other in traffic twice like idiots. He was telling me about a guy he knew who swore a woman stepped in front of his rig on Archer. White dress. And he'd hit the brakes so hard his head smacked the wheel. And when he got out shaking, hard on the mat, there was nobody there. Just the sound of someone crying far away like underwater. Truckers talk, Stan said, stirring sugar into a coffee that looked like it could stand up on its own. We all got big mouths, but some mouths go quiet after that road. You know? He looked at me. You look like somebody who got quiet about something. Maybe, I said. He shrugged, one corner of his mouth turning up. You don't owe the road a story, he said. You just owe it your eyes when you're on it. That night, back in my little bedroom with the radiator ticking, I took the gas station receipt out again. I thought about throwing it away. I didn't. I put it back in the wallet like I was setting it down on a shelf for later. I don't have a good ending here. I wish I did. I wish I could tell you I called and an old woman answered and said, she died in 1934. And then the line clicked and the world made sense. I wish I could tell you I never smelled lilacs again, or that I see her every Tuesday like clockwork at the same lamp and we talk about the weather like normal people do. None of that is true. Here's what is true. Sometimes when I drive past the cemetery by accident or because I forgot and took the most direct route like a normal person, my radio fuzzes for a second. Not a big deal. Radios do that. Sometimes in traffic I get a whiff of lilacs in a car that's mine and has never had a freshener in it. And I shrug it off because maybe someone on the sidewalk wears that perfume, even though there's no one on the sidewalk. Sometimes a rideshare request pops up on my phone with the name M and a destination pinned exactly between the gates. And when I hit accept, it cancels itself with a message that says, ride no longer available. A month ago, on a stupid warm night for April, I was driving Maya and Erin back from a movie, both of them sleepy and leaning into each other, and we hit the red light by the north corner of Resurrection. The windows were down. The iron smell of the fence drifted in. I felt the air change the way you feel a person enter a room with your back turned. A voice, not a scream, not a hum, threaded through the car like a draft. In it was the shape of a laugh and a dance step, the click of a heel on polished floor. It lasted one heartbeat. Then the light turned green and the moment folded itself small and went wherever moments like that go. I looked in the rear view. The back seat was empty. Of course it was. Alex? Maya said quietly, eyes on the road, not on me. You okay? Yeah, I said. Road's mean tonight. She nodded like that explained everything. Maybe it did. After we dropped them off, I drove home alone. I parked under the streetlight that hums and I sat there with the engine off. The car ticked as it cooled. Somewhere a train blew its horn twice, the sound thinning as it ran. I closed my eyes and tried to picture the gates in daylight. How harmless they look when you can see the grass. How stupid fear feels when the sun is out. When I opened my eyes, there was a small circle on the back seat where the leather looked a shade darker, like something damp had touched it. I watched it as it evaporated and I didn't move. There was no smell this time. Just air, and the feeling you get when someone has just left a room 2 seconds before you walked into it. I don't drive Archer much anymore. I don't kid myself that it matters. Whatever is there isn't a road exactly. It's something that uses the road. Maybe it uses people too, the way the city uses us. Makes us part of its story whether we mean to be or not. Every now and then when I'm cleaning out the car, I find a coin under the seat. Not modern, not old enough to be valuable, just a quarter with a year I don't remember being alive for. I put it in a little dish with the others. I don't spend them. I don't throw them away, and I don't pick up girls on Archer anymore, not on purpose. But sometimes late I'll be at a light with the radio low, and I'll see a figure walking along the fence, coat pinched closed, head down against the wind. I'll stare hard enough to make my eyes water. The figure will keep walking. I'll tell myself it's just someone's kid sister who stayed out too late. I'll tell myself there's no such thing as a scream you can smell on your clothes later. Then the light will turn green. The road will open up. The city will breathe in. And the gates, if you don't look at them directly, will seem to lean a little toward the street. Like they're listening for a car that already came and went. Like they're practicing how to be a mouth that opens and closes, letting someone out just long enough to remember she used to dance. I'm not the kind of person who believes in curses. I'm the kind of person who checks the batteries in the smoke detector twice, who carries an extra phone charger, who reads plaque signs in old cemeteries because I like history, not because I'm trying to scare myself. If you've ever visited Salem in the off-season, you know what I mean. Most of the spooky stuff is just t-shirts and mug designs and tours where the guide winks between every fact. I like the walking tours anyway. I like the way the cobblestones under your feet make you slow down and look. This happened a few years ago, the fall before the pandemic. I was 29 and working maintenance for the city. Trash pickup, lawn work, small repair jobs. My friend Lena got me the spot. We were both assigned to a loop that included a few squares, an old playground, and Howard Street Cemetery. If you've been there, you know it's not like the postcard cemeteries with tall obelisks everywhere. It's small, quiet. The stones are thin and dark and lean a little. The grass always feels damp even on dry days, and the edges of the place blur into the back of buildings and the old jail site. I knew the basic story about Giles Corey. Most people do. Crushed under boards and stones because he refused to enter a plea. His last words supposedly more weight. Every Halloween you'll hear the line at least a dozen times shouted from somewhere. There's another part of the story locals tell if you hang around long enough, that Corey appears before disasters in Salem. Fires, storms, deaths. People say he was seen right before the Great Salem Fire of 1914, walking between the stones, smiling a little like he knew what was coming. I had always filed that under tour guide spice. And then September turned colder, and the first thing happened. It was a Wednesday. I remember because on Wednesdays we had to check the trash barrels on the perimeter roads and make sure the lids weren't cracked. Lena and I split up. I took the cemetery and she took the playground. Our supervisor, Rick, stayed by the truck drinking coffee that smelled like burnt pennies. The sky had that thin, high cloud cover that makes everything feel like late afternoon even when it's noon. The cemetery gate has a latch that squeals even if you oil it. I went in, did my scan for bottles or candy wrappers, and started bagging leaves that had piled against the low stones. I heard someone cough and looked up. There was an older guy near the back corner, which is where the ground dips a little. White hair, shoulders hunched, a coat that looked too big and too thin at the same time, like something you get from a donation bin. He was moving slowly, dragging one foot. I figured he was a neighbor cutting through, so I called out, "Hey, we're working in here, just watch your step." He didn't look at me. His head was bent, and I remember thinking he might not have heard. Then I noticed he was barefoot. Bare feet on that wet grass in September, the color of his skin the same gray as the stones. "Sir?" I said, and took a step like I was going to catch up to him. He moved between two graves and was simply not there. There's no trick to that spot, no hedge to duck behind. I walked over and checked. The back wall is just a low fence and then a narrow path behind the properties on the next street. If he'd slipped through, I would have heard the boards flex, nothing. No footprints, and the ground was soft enough you could see where I'd stepped. I didn't tell Lena. I didn't want to be that person. I told myself I'd seen a guy and he'd left and I just missed it. That's it. But that night around 11, driving on Canal Street, a piece of truck tire blew out in the lane ahead of me. It wasn't a big deal, except the car to my left swerved into mine. It was low speed, we both braked in time, no one was hurt. We exchanged info under a streetlight that hummed like a bug zapper. When I got home, I had a voicemail from my mother in Danvers saying Dad had fainted while raking and the neighbors called the EMTs. He was okay. Dehydration, they said. I kept telling myself I was being dramatic. Tiny things stacked on top of each other feel bigger when you're tired. The second thing happened on a Saturday when Salem was packed. Tourists were already showing up for October. Lena and I were emptying the barrels next to the cemetery fence and a fire truck went past so slow I thought it was part of a parade. Lena shaded her eyes. "Where's the fire?" A guy in a colonial reenactor coat about 20 feet away said, like he was happy to be the one to deliver the line. "Howard Street. Old place 2 blocks over, we could smell it a minute later. Not big black smoke. The other kind. Paper and dust." We finished fast and cut through the cemetery to get around the people. The gate squealed. As we passed the middle row of stones, I glanced to my right and saw the same old man, shoulders bent, chest drawn in, looking down. There's no other way to say it, he looked flattened in the middle. Like his bones had collapsed inward. He had that faraway focus you see in people at hospital bedsides. I whispered without thinking, "Do you need help?" He turned his head slow. His eyes were dark but shiny like wet. He looked at me. It lasted maybe half a second. Then a tour group erupted in applause behind us, some joke I missed, and I flinched, and when I looked back, the man wasn't there. We reached the corner and saw the smoke. It was a small kitchen fire, already out by the time we stopped. A woman stood on the sidewalk hugging herself. I caught pieces of what she told a firefighter. Oven mitt, grease, she thought she'd turned the knob off. She kept saying, "My kid was sleeping. My kid was sleeping." Her neighbor had smelled it before she did and pounded on the door. No injuries. They cleared the block in under an hour. "Did you see that guy?" I asked Lena when we walked back. "What guy?" "Old guy, barefoot." She made a face. "Why are you looking at men's feet?" "I'm serious. I saw 3 Jack Sparrows and a witch with Crocs. Is that who you mean?" I let it go. That night doing dishes, I realized my chest felt tight. Not like pain, pressure. I told myself it was anxiety or the way I'd been hunched. I put on a stupid show and fell asleep on the couch. I know this is long already, but there's no short version that doesn't make me sound like I'm leaving things out. This is how it built. Over the next 2 weeks, every time I had to pass through Howard Street Cemetery alone, the air felt wrong. The easiest way to explain it is the way basements feel in houses that flood sometimes. Even dry, they smell like wet. The grass kept sticking to my boots like my weight had doubled. I started walking around the outside instead of cutting through. Even then, I'd catch myself counting without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. I'd read later that the men who placed the stones on Corey counted. I'm not saying that was in my head already. I'm saying sometimes my brain would get quiet enough that the numbers came in on their own. Lena noticed I was being weird but chalked it up to October in Salem, which is a circus. People get pushy. You get yelled at for moving a barrel while someone's trying to take a picture with it. The only person who said anything that cut through was Lou, one of the overnight security guards who does rounds near the jail site. He's old Boston. Flat vowels, jokes that land like a nudge you've learned to like. He was sitting on the back step of a building near the cemetery one evening when I was finishing, and he said, not looking at me, "You been seeing him?" It was early enough that the sky was still blue. I played dumb. Seeing who? He picked something out of his tooth and flicked it. "Don't play with me. You work this loop more than most. He likes the ones who show up, if that makes sense." I sat next to him. "You're messing with me?" He shook his head. "You don't have to believe me. Doesn't change what happens. I seen him when I was your age and again when the diner burned over on the point in what, 03? He was watching from across the street. When the line of smoke hit the power lines, he looked at me like he was waiting to see if I'd say something. I didn't. He likes it when you don't. What happens if you do? I said, "I don't know," he said and snorted. I'm not that brave. I wanted him to be laughing. He wasn't. He rubbed his chest like it ached. I told him about the barefoot man. I didn't say Corey, I didn't have to. Lou nodded once. "Don't follow him. Whatever you do, don't try to make him turn around. I should have listened. I'm not writing this for advice points. I'm writing this because I didn't listen, and I want it off me." There was a storm forecast for the last Thursday in October. The kind of nor'easter that makes the harbor look hammered. We were supposed to get heavy wind, but not much else. Rick told us to secure the barrels and go home early. Around 3, the sky went that greenish color it gets right before things kick off. Leaves skittered like mice. I did a last pass along the fence line at the cemetery. The tour was just ending. The guide said in a theatrical whisper, "And that, dear friends, is why some of us won't cross Howard Street after dark." Everybody laughed. The wind caught a woman's scarf and flung it at the fence. She squealed like it was a ghost hand and then laughed at herself. There was no one in the cemetery when I walked to the gate. I was sure of that. I checked out of habit. Then I heard the cough again, faint and dry. I looked up. Back left corner. The dip in the ground. He was there facing me this time, hands hanging at his sides. His shirt was open at the throat like the collar had been torn wider. The skin in the hollow of his chest looked bruised. He wasn't transparent. He wasn't glowing. He looked like a man. The kind of man who would need help lifting a heavy box. Except my limbs went cold like I'd held my breath too long. I told myself I would walk. I would walk to the gate. I would latch it. I would leave. That's all. I took one step. The grass was slicker than it had any right to be. Another step. He didn't move. I could see his eyes clearly now. If he had smiled, if he had done anything like a nod or a gesture, I think I would have run. He didn't. He just looked at me the way people look at stretchers going by, curious and a little sorry and a little in denial. I reached the middle row and the wind shoved me. It wasn't a clean push. It was like invisible hands on my shoulders and something in my head said, "Not hands. Boards." I kept moving. I didn't talk. I didn't even clear my throat because it felt rude, which is insane, but that's the truth. When I was maybe 10 feet away, he moved. He didn't step. He was just the same distance away again, as if I'd eaten up the space and he'd slid it back between us. My chest hurt. Not pain, pressure, like a big dog sitting on me. I thought of Lou. "Don't follow him." "I'm not following," I said out loud, to no one, to him, to myself. He tilted his head. The wind cut sideways and the trees groaned, and all at once, far off, sirens rose somewhere over the roofs. It was a weird sound, some emergency call I couldn't place. The pressure grew. I put my palm on a headstone to steady myself, and the stone flexed. I know that sounds wrong. It should be solid. But it felt like a rib. I snatched my hand back. The old man's mouth shaped 2 words. I didn't hear them. I read them. More weight. I had a choice to make in that exact second. I had to either pretend none of it meant anything and laugh myself out of the cemetery, or I had to lean into what the city around me had been saying under its breath for 300 years. I leaned. I'm not proud. I leaned because I was scared, and leaning felt like the only way to steer it. "What do you want?" I said. His face didn't change. The pressure eased and then doubled, like someone had breathed with me and then held me down. Thunder rolled long and flat. The sirens multiplied. Somewhere a transformer popped. The light dimmed and it wasn't sunset. "Okay," I said. "Okay." I'm not sure who I was answering. I stepped backward. He didn't move. I stepped again. I was counting without choosing to. 1, 2, 3. On 3, the pressure let up a fraction. I kept doing that, 3 steps, pause, 3 steps, pause, until I was back at the gate. The old man was still there, half-turned now, looking past me. I followed his gaze. The sky over the mill district was torn white. That's what it looked like. Torn. A sheet ripped so you could see the weather behind it. A citywide text alert hit my phone a minute later. Line of severe squalls, microburst risk, take shelter. I jogged to the truck. Lena was already there, eyes huge. "We gotta go." We made it down Bridge Street just as the first heavy gust slammed the truck. Lena swore and gripped the door. The rain came not vertical but sideways, like someone hurling shovelfuls. We pulled into the garage and watched the security cameras flicker. The power held. Not everywhere. Downtown went dark in pockets. We sat on folding chairs with Rick listening to the scanner chatter. Flooding on one street, a falling limb through a car on another, and then the words that made Lena cover her mouth and look at me for some reason I didn't like. Structural collapse reported. Old brick. Rear of building facing. Howard Street. The voice crackled. "No reported injuries, copy, we've got it cleared, no injuries, copy. No one died. A fire escape failed and crashed into an alley. The building was empty at the time. A woman who lived 2 doors down tripped running to look and broke her wrist. A tree took down the fence at the old jail site. The next day, tourists walked around the tape eating kettle corn like it was part of the plan. I took Sunday off and drove to see my parents. My dad made jokes about being fragile, and my mother kept squeezing my hand and saying she hated the way the news talked about historic weather, like it was bragging. When I came back at dusk, Lou was at his post, smoking in a spot where he wasn't supposed to smoke. You see him? He asked. I nodded. He squinted. You ask him anything? Yeah, Lou's eyes shuddered. People do that. They ask like he's a person, like he wants the same things we want. What does he want? I said. I don't think he wants, Lou said. I think he is. Like a pressure system, like a tide. He took a drag and stared at the cemetery as if he'd prefer it sprouted a supermarket overnight. I'll tell you something else. The night before the big fire, my granddad's brother said he saw him walking, not in the cemetery, but along Harbor Street, smiling. Granddad said his brother never smiled again. Not really after he told it. Not because he was scared. Because whenever anything bad happened after that, even if it had nothing to do with Salem, he'd see the look on that old man's face. I waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. You want my advice, Lou said. You stop walking in there. Go around like the rest of us do when the air feels wrong. You can say it's silly. You can laugh and say you're not superstitious. That's fine. Do it with your mouth if you want. Just do it with your feet too. I started going around. It helped, or I told myself it helped. There were still things. I got a voicemail from a number I didn't know that was just 3 long seconds of labored breathing. And then the sound of something heavy settling. My upstairs neighbor's smoke alarm went off at 3 in the morning, and I heard the thud of him taking the battery out. And when I opened my door, the hallway smelled too strongly of cold stone. In a coffee shop, a kid playing with a handful of pebbles lined them up on the table and counted to 3 over and over, whispering. None of this is proof. I know that. If you want proof, go to a lab, not a cemetery. The last part is the part I almost didn't include, not because it's graphic or anything like that, but because writing it down makes me admit how small I felt. It was 2 weeks after the storm. The city had put up new temporary fencing at the jail site, and professional crews had checked the cemetery stones for stability. I was sweeping leaves off the sidewalk, not even thinking about the place behind me, when a tour group passed. The guide was talking about Corey in a voice that told me he'd repeated this speech more times than anyone should have to repeat any speech. According to legend, he said, Giles Corey appears before tragedies in Salem. Folks say a woman interrupted. Tragedies like what? Fires? Deaths? The guide shrugged like he wanted to keep it light. The big one people talk about is the Great Salem Fire of 1914. There are accounts of an older man wandering among these very stones the day before, smiling. Was it Corey? Was it someone's grandpa? Was it just a story to make sense of a city that had to rebuild itself? You decide. They loved that. People love being told they can decide about things that already happened. A man in the back of the group had his phone out and pointed into the cemetery, even though there's a sign that says no photography. He took a burst of shots, then frowned at the screen and pinched to zoom. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. He stepped toward me and held up the phone like we were in it together. Hey, does that look like a person to you? I looked. In his photo, there was the usual stuff. Leaning stones, a bit of trash we'd missed, the dip in the ground at the back left. And in the middle of the frame, slightly out of focus, was a man. Shoulders bent, chest pulled in, head tilted like he was listening for a sound only he could hear. He was facing away from the camera, walking, barefoot. You could almost see the arch of his foot in the wet grass. I felt my throat close. The man with the phone laughed. It's probably a trick of the light. He swiped to the next photo. The figure wasn't there. See? A little girl tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, that man looks sad. The father glanced down and ruffled her hair without looking again at the picture. It's nothing. It's a shadow. I made it to the end of my route. I made it home. I locked my door and double-checked the stove and checked the windows and sat on the floor with my back against the couch, counting breath in threes, and when it got quiet enough that the house sounded like a seashell, I heard a small shift somewhere deep, like a building settling, like weight being added, like an old decision being made again. I don't walk past Howard Street Cemetery anymore. I take the long way, even in daylight, even on beautiful blue May mornings. People ask why I avoid that side. I tell them traffic's easier on the other block. I say the truth sometimes, which is that the ground there always feels damp. If someone brings up the story about Corey, I change the subject. If they push, I tell them what I told you. I don't think he wants anything, and I don't think he's angry in a way that we understand. I think he's a pressure system. I think he is the weight that was placed on him, spread out over time, still settling, still counting. I think he shows up to remind us that everything heavy lands somewhere. Last week there was a kitchen fire 2 streets over. No one was hurt. The smoke made the sky weird for an hour. The next morning, leaving my apartment, I saw a heel-shaped mark in the thin mud by the curb. Could have been from a construction worker. Could have been anything. I stepped around it. There's no big finish here. Nothing came to drag me into the ground. I didn't wake up with stones on my chest or hear a voice in the walls. The scariest things I've ever seen in Salem were totally ordinary. Bare feet on wet grass. The way a photo shows you something your eyes didn't. The sound of weight shifting in another room when you know you live alone. If you go to Howard Street and you feel like cutting through to save a minute, hey, maybe you will, and maybe nothing will happen, and maybe you'll laugh at yourself. If the air feels wrong, if you find yourself counting steps without meaning to, if you see an old man moving slower than the wind around him, don't tell him to stop. Don't tell him anything. Just go around. Use your mouth to make jokes if you want, but use your feet to leave. 2 nights ago, thunder rolled somewhere out past Marblehead. It was probably just weather. The lights dimmed and came back, and my phone buzzed with one of those test alerts they send sometimes. I shut the curtains. I sat on the couch. I listened for that small settling sound. I didn't hear it. Not then. But this morning, walking to work, I turned the corner by the cemetery out of habit because habits are faster than fear, and I saw a fresh bunch of flowers tied to the fence with ribbon, someone's memorial for something recent. The ribbon had slipped and the bouquet was dragging on the ground. I bent to fix it. The knot pulled at my fingers the way wet rope does. When I stood up, there was a man across the fence, back left corner where the ground dips. He was looking down, hands open at his sides. He didn't move. I blinked and he was gone. The pressure in my chest eased before I even fully felt it. I didn't go in. I didn't follow. I went around. Once you start noticing weight, you notice how often people shift it. Groceries from one hand to the other. Toddlers from hip to hip. Stories from mouths to ears. You notice how often people ask for more of it without knowing. You notice that when the wind is wrong, the stones look like they're leaning in to listen. And you notice that some places in some towns are still waiting for something that already happened, over and over, and we're the ones who keep handing it to them 3 small steps at a time. I used to think the scary part of Old Town was the parking. That was my joke when customers at the shop asked me about the ghosts. The only thing that'll haunt you here is the tow truck, I'd say, and point them to the lot behind the taco stand. I worked nights at a little souvenir place on San Diego Avenue, the one with the hand-painted tiles and the bin of cheap maracas by the door. It sat between a candle shop and a fast casual taco spot with picnic tables under string lights. If you've ever been to Old Town, you can picture the street. Old adobes, tour groups, that low hum of people eating and taking pictures. And right around the corner from all that, tucked behind a white stucco wall with a wrought iron gate, is El Campo Santo Cemetery. You can miss it if you're just there for margaritas. People do. They don't realize the street itself is part of the cemetery. Nobody does until they notice the brass markers in the asphalt. This wasn't the summer. It was last November, a week after Dia de los Muertos, when the marigold garlands were still up and the paper skulls hadn't faded yet. The air does this thing at night where it smells like cumin and tortillas and cold, damp earth at the same time. There's the ocean somewhere out there past the hills, and when the marine layer slides in, it softens the edges of everything. Lights smear, voices carry. That's the setting. There were 3 of us closing most nights. Me, my coworker Mara, and our boss, Mrs. Ortega. She was one of those bosses who doubles as an aunt you never had. She wrapped extra scarves around us when it got chilly and pretended not to notice when Mara gave a friend a locals discount. I was 27, saving for a move I swore I'd make to Portland. Mara was 30 and had this blunt honesty I liked. She'd say things like, "If a ghost takes me, it better be to a better apartment." We had a regular security guard, Tony, who did rounds between our block and the little plaza by the candle shop. He walked heavy, like his boots wanted to be heard. The first weird thing happened on a Monday after we closed. We were counting out the drawer and something slid behind me on the floor. I turned around expecting to see a coaster or one of those tiny ceramic suns we sell by the register. It was a quarter. It had rolled from the front door clear across the floor and stopped at the threshold to the back room. It looked clean, almost new. I glanced at Mara. "Did you drop that?" I asked. She shook her head. "Must be your tip from the other side," she said and smirked. That's how she handled the Old Town ghost thing. Keep it light. I picked up the quarter and it was cold. Colder than the tile. Not freezer cold, but winter in a fridge cold. Mrs. Ortega watched me hold it and pursed her lips. "Leave it," she said. "Some things want to be where they land." "Okay." I set it on the counter. She took a paper cup and turned it upside down over the coin, like we were catching a spider. It sounds like a story in a story, but she really did that. For the rest of the week, customers pointed at the cup and I told them it was part of a game we were doing. I lifted it once when nobody was looking. The quarter was gone. I don't know who took it. I told myself it was one of the kids who always grab at everything and their parents go, "Hands, Mateo." But that night, when I stepped out to smoke, I quit in January, but not then. I felt a little tug at the back of my hoodie. I turned. The sidewalk was empty. Wind moved the Papal Picado banners overhead. Across the way, in the glass of the candle shop window, I saw myself, cigarette tip bright, and the empty street behind me looked like a stage waiting for its actors. Old Town empties out different than downtown. It doesn't flash to silence, it thins like water draining. Those brass markers in the street, little round discs the city set to show where bodies still lay under the asphalt, catch the streetlights when cars pass. People step over them without seeing. I didn't always see them either. But that week I noticed. I noticed how the air went cold on that patch of sidewalk where the plaster wall meets the cemetery fence. I noticed how the streetlight nearest, the gate flickered, always that same one, like it had a slow blink. "Stop staring at the cemetery," Mara said on Tuesday. "You'll start seeing things and then I'll have to be the tough one." "What if you're the one who sees something?" I asked. She tossed me a roll of bubble wrap. "Then we burn the whole block down and say it was a grease fire." Tony timed his rounds by the hour. You could set your watch to the scrape of his keys. He hated when tourists took selfies with the graves. "Be respectful," he'd say. "If this was your grandma, you'd want respectful." He told me, once while I was sweeping the doorway, that the worst nights were the quiet ones. "It's like the place remembers itself," he said. "When it's loud and full, it's a show. When it's empty, it's a person." On Wednesday, a guy in a brown coat came in right at closing. He had that tired traveler look, dusty cuffs, hair that had done time under a hat. He didn't browse. He walked straight to the counter and asked if we sold maps. "Maps?" I said. "You mean like the Old Town walking tour map?" He nodded. His eyes were blue but cloudy, like dishes that went through too many cycles. I pulled out the free fold-out we kept near the postcards and opened it to show him the star for El Campo Santo. He placed a finger on the spot. His fingernail was spotless, like he'd never worked a day, or like he'd washed his hands 100 times that day. "What time do they shut the gate?" he asked. 10, I said. "But the street side's always open." He looked at me like I'd answered in a different language. "I don't want to be there after 10, he said. Mara came from the back with the trash bag and did her customer service smile. "You folks from out of town?" she asked. The man didn't answer. He folded the map, slid $1 into our tip jar with exact care, like placing a coin on a tongue. When he turned to go, I noticed his coat had these sewn-on cloth buttons I hadn't seen on anything modern. The thread was uneven. I told myself it was a vintage thing. We locked up. When we stepped outside, the air did that wet, cold bite. The streetlight near the gate clicked on, went off, then came back with a weak glow. The man in the brown coat stood under it. When he saw us, he crossed the street and headed away from the cemetery. We watched him until he disappeared around the corner by the taco stand. "People give me weirder vibes on the trolley," Mara said, like she had to add a punchline. We both noticed the second thing at the same time. The brass disc in the center of the crosswalk, the one I'd stepped on a dozen times, was gone. Not missing like removed, just not there. The asphalt looked smooth. I thought maybe I'd been wrong about its exact spot. Then the wind shifted and I got a nose full of that smell. Not sewage, not food waste. Dirt, but old dirt. You know how a basement smells when you first open it after a long time? Like pages and soil? That. Don't, Mara said, because I'd taken a step toward the gate. Let's just go home. I don't usually walk past the cemetery at night. If I have to catch the bus, I go the other way, past the market with the plastic crates and the little shrine tucked in the corner. But Thursday our boss left early for a church thing, and the bus tracker app told me my route had a delay, so I decided I'd cut through and grab a rideshare on the other side. It's 2 extra minutes that way. I told myself I was being efficient. Tony was sitting on the low wall, his radio hissing something soft. He gave me a nod. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "You okay?" He flexed his hands inside his gloves. "Keep getting that feeling." He pointed at his forearm. Goosebumps like chicken skin rose under his sleeve. He had his share of old town stories, the kind you tell because it helps to get them out of your head and into someone else's for a while. But he didn't share one then. He just said, "They paved over a lot, you know. People don't like to think about it, but the ground knows." I looked through the bars. El Campo Santo is tidy, with white wood crosses and a few stone markers. There's a little shrine with candles that people bring from home, half-burned wax pooling over glass. A couple of the graves have chains around them. The path is sand and hard-packed dirt. It's not grand like the cemetery on the hill. It's small and stubborn and right there next to the road, like someone said, "The dead can live next door." I cut down the sidewalk that runs along the outside of the cemetery's wall. My phone showed me the little cars of other drivers circling and not quite snagging my request. Streetlight, dark patch, streetlight. The cold spot by the gate felt like stepping into an open refrigerator. I took another step and felt that tug on my hoodie again. I spun so fast I almost tripped. No one. I laughed out loud because it felt ridiculous. "Okay," I said to nobody. Point taken. My app pinged. Luis, a driver I knew by face if not by name, had accepted. I saw his car pull up on the far side of the cemetery, the passenger side window rolling down with a squeak. "You Alicia's friend?" he called out. I remembered Alicia, a barista who moonlighted as a tour guide. "That's me," I said, walking around the gate. Luis frowned at the dashboard. "My map tried to take me through there," he said, nodding at the cemetery. "Look." He held up his phone, and sure enough, the little blue line did a crazy thing where it cut across the dirt paths and rejoined the road. He laughed. "Glitch, I got in." The car smelled like pine and vanilla in that cheap air freshener way. We pulled out, turned left, and for a moment the headlights crossed the white crosses inside the fence. It felt rude, like shining a light into someone's bedroom. Luis tapped the radio. "You're the last one I'm picking up," he said. "My kid's got a project due. God help me, it involves glitter." We were halfway down the block when I saw in the side mirror a man step into the road behind us. "Brown coat?"
He didn't look at us.
He looked at the gate like he was decide something serious. Then he vanished. Not poof lightning, not Hollywood. He was just there and then he wasn't, like my eyes had blinked but I knew they hadn't. "Did you see?" I started. Luis spoke over me. "Nope," he said. "Nope, nope, nope." He kept his eyes on the road, knuckles losing color on the wheel. "You saw him?" I said. He nodded once. "Last year," he said, like he was answering a question I hadn't asked. "Picked up a fare by the plaza. Man gets in wearing old clothes. Sits quiet, doesn't say an address. Meter starts anyway. We go 1 block. He says, 'Stop at the cemetery.' I do. I look back. No one there. Passenger door opens like it's making a point. My kid? She thinks I was doing a TikTok thing. I don't talk about it. He dropped me at my place in Mission Hills and I said thank you like it was any other ride. When I got inside, the smell of my apartment, laundry soap, and day-old coffee stabilized me. I washed my face and told myself I was tired. That's always the bargain you make, right? You're tired. Your brain is staging its own little theater. You saw a man in a brown coat because you were thinking about him. The quarter was cold because the tile was colder than you realized. The hoodie tug was a snag on the door, a breeze. You can make it make sense if you want to. For sleep, I wanted to. On Friday, we were busy. A bus tour unloaded and our shop filled with people trying to decide between 3 flavors of hot sauce and a mug that said, Sandy O. I didn't think about the cemetery at all until Mrs. Ortega handed me a box to take to the back, and there it was. Another quarter, just inside the stockroom door. I didn't touch it. I called Mrs. Ortega over. Don't step on it, she said. She fetched the paper cup and set it down. Her mouth pinched in that way again, like she'd tasted something bitter. Mara's screwing with us, I said. It came out too loud. Mara poked her head around the corner. I'm literally hand-selling fridge magnets, she said. I don't have time for haunted money. A group came in wearing matching sweatshirts that said Whaley House After Dark. They told us they'd heard knocking where there shouldn't be knocking and wanted to buy candles for protection. I didn't say that candles light up shadows as much. As they chased them, we closed late. Tony had taken his break early, so it was just me and Mara doing the last sweep. She stuck her head out the door and called into the dark. Any final shoppers of the living or otherwise? Don't, I said. Joking felt like a flimsy umbrella. We turned off the inside lights. The store went from color to outline. The glass cases turned into reflections of the street. That streetlight by the cemetery did its slow blink. The cold came through the door like a breath. Let's go, Mara said. I grabbed my bag from under the counter. The paper cup over the quarter on the stockroom floor clicked. Not like wind or plastic settling, like something tapped it from the inside. Once, twice, we both froze. You kicked it, she said. I didn't move. I could hear my own blood in my ears. The cup slid 2 inches across the floor. No sound but the whisper of paper on tile. It stopped. Then it slid back the way it had come, like whatever was under it had tried pushing and then decided to pull instead. Mara put her hand over her mouth. I stepped forward, reached down, flipped the cup. There was no quarter. A ring of damp had formed on the tile. Not a spill. Not a ring shaped like the cup. A dark circle, 3 fingers wide, like something wet had lay there and soaked down and then been lifted. The center was dry. The damp ring felt cold when I touched it. I know, dumb to touch. I couldn't help it. It felt like touching the inside of a freezer door that needs defrosting. We're leaving, Mara said. It wasn't a suggestion. Outside, the street was thinner than usual for a Friday. A guitar player packed up across the way. The taco place wiped down the last table. The gate to the cemetery stood open, just enough to look like someone had eased through. Tony was nowhere. The streetlight did its blink. Don't look, Mara said, and I did the opposite. I looked. The man in the brown coat stood by the gate, half shadow, half light. He wasn't foggy. He wasn't translucent. He looked like a person waiting to cross the street. He looked like someone finding a place, sir, I said, immediately wishing I hadn't. Stupid thing to say to anything. Do you need... He raised a hand. Not guilty, not stop, not hello. A small lift of the fingers, like acknowledging a neighbor he didn't know the name of. Then he turned toward the gate and slipped through the space where the iron didn't meet the wall. No squeeze, no scrape. Just there and then inside. Please don't, Mara whispered. I didn't move. I think some part of me thought that if we watched it, if we stood witness, it would be real in a way that could be worked with. It did not help. There's a spot just inside the gate where the path forks. One way goes past a grave with a low iron fence. The other goes toward a larger stone marker with an engraved cross. He stopped there. He looked down like he was reading the ground. Then he bent, and for a second his coat fell open and I saw a shirt with a high collar. No buttons, I recognized. He placed his hand palm down on the dirt, thumb pointed like a compass. Then he straightened and kept walking deeper, toward the back where the fence meets the alley. We couldn't see him after that. The string lights at the taco place threw a weak glow. The streetlight hummed. Cars rolled by in the distance, not ours. Call Tony, I said. Mara's hand shook as she dialed. No answer. I'll go, she said. You will not, I said. But my legs moved anyway. I don't know why. Maybe I thought he was lost. Maybe I thought if I could talk to him like I talked to a confused tourist, I could undo whatever knot he was in. I went to the gate and put my hand on the cold metal. Cold like the ring on the tile. It thrummed. That's not a word I use, but that's what it did. Like a truck idling far away. I stepped in. It didn't feel like a movie. It felt like walking into someone's living room when you thought it was the hallway to a restroom. Immediate wrongness. The kind that isn't dramatic until you realize it isn't going away. The path is narrow. The sand crunches under your shoes. The graves look like they're watching you because they are the part of you that can't look away from the thing that scares you. I've been in there during the day. People leave coins and notes and little bottles of tequila. At night, those offerings look like teeth in the dirt. I followed the path right the way he'd gone. The air inside the cemetery felt colder than outside by 10 degrees. My breath did a visible thing it doesn't usually do in San Diego. The lights from the street didn't quite make it past the wall. I had my phone, of course, and the temptation to turn on the flashlight was strong. But it felt like the kind of place where a beam would call attention. I kept it dark. "Hey," I said. Talking loud made my scalp tight. I kept my voice low. "Sir, you left something at the store." I heard how dumb that was. I kept going. I reached the back corner where the fence meets an old plaster wall. On the other side of that wall is an alley, and beyond that, the back of another shop. You can hear bins and boxes when people wheel them out. Tonight it was quiet. The man in the brown coat stood facing the wall like time out. He had both hands pressed flat where the plaster met the ground. He didn't turn. He didn't move. I stopped a few steps behind him. My brain did the jumpy thing. If I touched his shoulder and my hand went through, I'd scream. If I touched his shoulder and it didn't go through, I'd scream. "Can I help you?" I asked, because sometimes the stupid normal words are the only ones that come. His head tilted just enough to break and reform the line of his hat brim. His voice, when it came, sounded like someone talking into a closet. Not far, not whisper, just muffled by old air. "You moved the road," he said. My mouth went dry the way it does the first time you admit something out loud. "Not me," I said. "The city," he nodded, slow. "You put the road over our heads," he said. Not accusation, fact. He lowered one hand. He tapped the ground with the heel of his palm. A hollow place, a dull sound, I think, or I told myself that. "I'm sorry," I said. I meant it. I know that's useless as a sentence, but it's what I had. His shoulders went up and down once, not laughter. Not a sob. The motion of a person reconciling a thing they can't reconcile. "You should go," he said. I wanted to be the person who stayed. I wanted to be the person who didn't run at the bad part of the story. My legs were smarter. They took me backward step by careful step. He didn't turn to watch me. He pressed his hand flat to the wall again and leaned in, like listening. When I got back to the gate, my phone vibrated, and I flinched. "Tony, don't be in there," he said without hello. His voice was small over the radio hiss. "They're walking." "Who?" I asked. "The ones under," he said. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The air outside felt 10 times warmer. Mara grabbed my sleeve. "What did he say?" she asked. I opened my mouth to tell her, and everything on the street went still at once. Not silent. Still. The flag by the taco place froze mid-flutter. The steam from the grill hung like a photo. The blinking streetlight paused on like it had made a choice. In that stillness, I heard footsteps where footsteps shouldn't be. Not on the path, not on gravel. A slow drag, like someone moving where there was no space to lift their feet. It came from under the road. I didn't know how to hold that sound in my head. Cars drove over that spot all day. People walked dogs over it and spilled salsa and dropped their keys. Right then, the road sounded like a ceiling. A slow, careful weight, as if whoever was beneath didn't want to startle the floor above them. Something tugged my hoodie again. Harder this time, not a joke. I moved forward without choosing to. Mara made a noise, a soft like a door hinge. Tony rounded the corner, breath fogging. He looked at the ground, not at us. "Don't stand on them," he said. "Not tonight." We backed away from the brass disc that had been gone and was now back, shining dull in the street. I hadn't seen it return. One second it was not there. The next it was exactly where it had always been, as if my memory had been a bad angle. The stillness broke. The flag started its lazy move. The streetlight blinked again, relieved. "Go home," Tony said to us. "Please." Luis texted me without my asking if I needed a ride. I don't know if Alicia told him, or if he was just being the kind of person who senses the world tilting a few degrees. We waited for him by the market. We didn't talk. In the car, he didn't turn on the radio. He didn't say, "So what happened?" He just drove. Eyes a little too wide, checking his side mirror every block like he expected to see someone sitting behind us. When he dropped us, he said, "Leave your shoes outside tonight." "Why?" Mara asked. "Just do it," he said. "My grandmother." She said that's how you keep the ground on the ground. I did. The shoes steamed a little in the damp air on my doorstep like they were exhaling. The next morning I woke up feeling like I'd dreamed too much. The world had that thin, overslept quality. On my kitchen table there was a quarter. I didn't put it there. I live alone. I do not have casual quarter levers. It sat on a folded Old Town map I'd brought home months ago as a joke. The quarter wasn't shiny. It was dull and rubbed smooth in the middle, like it had traveled and been handled by hands that worked. When I pressed my finger to it, the metal felt warm. Not room temperature. Warm like someone had been holding it a long time. I should have called in. Instead, I went to work because that's what you do. Mrs. Ortega had already opened. She had coffee for me in a cup that said Bestia. She looked at me over the rim, like she could see the things I'd seen. You look like you slept under a picnic table, she said. I found money on my table, I said. She nodded, not surprised. Bring it, she said. We'll give it back. To who? I asked. She shrugged like you shrug when your family has a story you don't tell outside. To the place, she said. To the ground. We walked together to the gate. Tony stood by the streetlight that hadn't stopped blinking. He had a coin in his hand, too. He didn't ask what we were doing. He walked with us. Inside the cemetery in daylight is a different animal. Birds scold you for existing. The dirt looks like dirt, not like a lid. We went to the little shrine with the candles. Mrs. Ortega set her quarter down on the stone lip. Tony set his on the other side. I set mine between. People had left others. Nickels, pennies, a tiny silver button. The little lineup felt like a throat clearing, a soft apology. A tour came in behind us. Their guide spoke in her best story voice about cold spots and tugging, and a taxi driver who picked up a man in 19th century clothes. Tony rolled his eyes, but not mean. The tourist looked at us like we were part of the set dressing. Back at the shop, Mara had the door propped open. We're doing a sale on Not Speaking of Last Night, she said. Everything half off. We laughed because relief sometimes wears a joke costume. All morning, customers bought sugar skull shot glasses and stickers of coyotes howling at mission bells. Around noon, a guy in a brown coat walked past the window. I stiffened like a cat spotting a dog. He had a modern backpack. His coat was a thrift store special. He looked like somebody's boyfriend. Breathe, Mara said. There isn't a big end. I wish there were. I wish I were the kind of storyteller who could tell you we dug and found a nameplate, or we called the city and they added more markers, or the man in the brown coat stopped coming by. None of that. The city doesn't even believe the map is wrong because the map isn't wrong. It's the ground that remembers differently. Sometimes the streetlight by the gate blinks faster than the others. Sometimes it holds steady for 2 nights and you think, see, stupid to be scared. Sometimes you feel a tug at your hem when you pass and your body flinches even if your brain says static. I haven't seen the man in the brown coat like I saw him that night since, but some nights, when the marine layer makes everything wet and the taco place's grill hisses like surf, I'll see someone step into the road and stop at the brass disc. They'll hesitate, like they're about to step on someone's shoulders. Some do it on purpose, a dare. Some step around without knowing why. You can watch them choose. 2 weeks ago, a receipt printed blank in the middle with ink only at the top and bottom, leaving a white band that lined up exactly with the level of the counter where customers place their hands. We printed again, same. Mara said, maybe the ghosts are on strike, and I said, maybe we are. And we both laughed too hard. We gave the lady her change and she dug in her bag and dropped a quarter in our jar without looking. It hit with a flat clink. I swear this is the part that feels insane to tell. It jumped. Not high. Not enough to catch the eye of anyone not waiting for it. A twitch. It looked like it didn't want to lay on top of the other coins. It wanted space. When we closed that night, I covered the jar with a paper cup. Mrs. Ortega didn't stop me. I moved apartments in January. Not to Portland, not yet. I still work the shop sometimes. I still take the long way around if I'm on the phone and not paying attention. And if a tourist asks me about the ghosts, I don't make the parking joke. I say, be respectful. I say, don't stand too long on the brass discs in the road. I say, if you feel a tug, go with it. They laugh and buy their magnets and post their photos and leave. My cab receipts folder on my phone has a ride with no fee. No time, no end, just passenger unknown. Luis says the same one shows up on his app sometimes and he deletes it. A street cleaner told me, at dawn once, that his big brush hits a soft patch by the gate and skips every time, like he's rolling over a carpet seam. Tony got a different job, but he still comes by. He stands with his coffee under the streetlight and watches the brass disc in the road like it's a pot that won't boil while you're looking. If you go, you might not feel anything. You might eat tacos and take a selfie by a white cross and leave believing in nothing but churros. Or maybe you'll feel your shirt tug like a kid needing you to bend down. Maybe your phone map will draw a line that doesn't make sense, across a dirt path it has no business knowing. Maybe when you're counting out change later, a quarter will sit on your table in a warm little circle of air, and you'll know without knowing what it wants. I stopped trying to decide if any of it is a haunting. It's a neighborhood. People live there. People lived there. That's the whole story. The dead aren't good at paperwork. The city paints lines. The ground keeps its own ledger. Every so often it pulls at your clothes to remind you to look down. And if you look down at the right time, you might see the man in the brown coat standing under the flickering light, hand raised in that small neighborly way, waiting for traffic to pass so he can go where he belongs. If you see him, don't call out like I did. Don't try to fix him. Just step off the brass disc while he walks. That's all anyone is asking. A little room to pass. A small detour for the ones under the road. I didn't plan to spend a night inside Greenwood Cemetery. I'm not a ghost hunting type, and I'm definitely not the person who says let's split up in horror movies. But in June of last year, I flew down to New Orleans for a conference my company was hosting at a hotel off Canal Street. It was my first time in the city. I expected the food, the brass bands, the heat that hits like a damp towel. I didn't expect the quiet. There's a kind of hush New Orleans has between sounds, like even the air is listening for something. I shared a room with my coworker, Maya, who's the kind of person that treats a convention schedule like a scavenger hunt. She had a spreadsheet for panels, coffee shops, and must-do experiences. On our second day, she tossed one of those glossy rack cards onto my bed, the kind you find by hotel elevators. Cemetery tour, she said. St. Louis #1 was booked, so we've got Greenwood. They say it's got the prettiest tombs, and a legend. The legend was printed on the back in the kind of font you only see on Halloween invitations. A woman in black, grieving her family taken by yellow fever, drifting between crypts at night, sobbing and clutching a parasol. If you tried to follow her, the card said, you'd lose your way. A caretaker once followed her and vanished. His lantern burned long after the rain. Tourist bait, I told Maya. Also, it says, do not enter after sunset. She grinned. We're going at 10 in the morning. We met the guide by the wrought iron gates. She introduced herself as Stella and handed out paper fans, which felt more polite than helpful in that heat. The tombs rose around us like marble houses with names chiseled into the lintels. Dumont, Arsenault, Lafitte. Not that Lafitte, Stella said, but a cousin. The above-ground vaults caught the light in a way photographs don't. It wasn't just brightness. It was a chalky glare that made you squint. High grass pressed against the gravel paths. The air smelled of wet limestone and cut flowers that had gone a day too long in the sun. Greenwood is relatively young compared to some others, Stella said. Still plenty of stories. She walked with a practiced slowness, timing her facts to our footsteps. One of the oldest involves a lady they call the mourner. Black dress, parasol. Some say she's from the fever years. Some say the influenza. People disagree about her name. But if you hear crying, you don't go looking for it. Maya rolled her eyes, but I was listening. I don't believe in much, but I'm not stupid enough to argue with someone else's fear on their home turf. We turned down a road that seemed narrower than the others. Trees leaned in from the edges, live oaks with those long beards of Spanish moss. Stella stopped at a family vault whose marble front was stained by the city's kind of rain, the kind that doesn't so much fall as seep. There was a small wind-up lantern sitting at the base like an offering, old-fashioned, with a thick glass window scuffed into frosted patches. It wasn't lit. This is the tomb most folks associate with her, Stella said. Family lost 3 children in 1 week. The mother died a month later. Husband remarried and moved upriver. The story says the first wife never left. She comes back every night, cries into her parasol so you can't see her face. A man at the back, a guy with a camera and the kind of hat that said he was trying not to be a tourist, asked what everyone wants to ask on these tours. Has anyone here seen her? Stella smiled politely. I've heard her. twice, and please don't go looking. I'm not saying you'll disappear. I'm saying this cemetery will confuse you in the dark. The paths change. It's a trick of perspective. You'll think you're heading toward the lights on City Park Avenue and wind up deeper in, surrounded by the same names you passed an hour before. She pointed at the lantern. People leave those. I don't touch them. The tour ended with everyone holding their paper fans like paddles. Maya bought a bottle of water from a cooler near the gate and asked for a restaurant recommendation. Stella circled a spot on a paper map and, almost as an afterthought, told us to bring an umbrella if we walked anywhere that afternoon. The weather turns fast here. We didn't go back to the cemetery that day. We had panels, a happy hour, and a dinner where a client insisted we try a cocktail that promised to be like absinthe but friendlier. It was not friendly. I went to bed sometime after midnight with the steady whir of the air conditioner drilling into my dreams. The second night, after everything wrapped up, we were free. Our little group split. Some people went to Frenchman Street. Maya wanted something spooky but not like cursed. She remembered the mourner. Just a peek, she said. We'll stay on the sidewalk. We're not idiots. We walked up Canal and turned at the bank where the streetcar braked with that metal-on-metal squeal that makes your molars itch. Greenwood sat there calm and heavy like a sleeping animal. The gate was locked. A few candles flickered here and there inside, leftovers from earlier visitors. The air had that pregnant feeling it gets before summer rain. We weren't alone. A man stood by the fence near the corner. He wore a security uniform that was a shade too pale and a badge that caught the streetlight. He was talking low to a woman leaning against the brick pillar. She had one hand on a bicycle handlebar and the other holding a cigarette like it needed steadying. Don't even let the teenagers hop the wall anymore, he was saying. Last year a kid broke his ankle and I'm the one got in trouble. Maya asked if it was okay to stand there for a bit. The guard, his name tag said Rene, shrugged and asked us to keep it down. If I stop here, right here where we made a series of decisions that, summed together, feel like a yes to something we didn't understand. It would be simple to blame Maya. She's the one who said, if she's real, wouldn't she want witnesses? She's the one who held her phone up over the fence like it was a periscope. She's the one who said, wait, did you hear that? But I heard it first. You don't expect crying to sound like that. You expect a jagged sob or a wail. This was contained, like someone trying not to cry and failing quietly. It came from inside, somewhere back beyond the first row of tombs. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Everyone stilled at once, Maya, me, Renee, the woman with the bike. The cigarettes stopped. The streetcar sounded far away, like another city. Renee shook his head before anyone could say a word. Nope, he said almost to himself. Not tonight. The crying didn't get closer. It didn't get farther. It was constant, like a faucet barely turned. There were words in it that I couldn't make out, like syllables chewed into mush. Maya whispered, "It's a prank." The woman with the bike whispered, "I used to hear my aunt in the kitchen when she was gone." Sound travels. Renee said nothing. Then, almost like it knew we were there, the crying stopped. There was a second of empty air, and then a thin, scratchy sound like a nail brushing down fabric. It went on for a few inches, slow, careful. Renee flinched. He lifted a hand and made a small motion toward the darkness with his palm up, the way you would to a stray dog. "I'm calling Baptiste," he said, like this was routine. He pulled out his phone, squinted, then pocketed it again. "Battery's dead. Who's Baptiste?" Maya asked. "Caretaker," Renee said. "Well, night caretaker when he feels like it. Lives a block over, behind the funeral home." He gestured with his chin. "He'll say leave it alone." The crying came back, lower now, almost mindful of us. Maya gripped the fence. "What if she needs help?" "She don't," Renee said, and his accent turned his words to river stones. "That's a long song, Cher. We might have left then if not for what I saw next. I'm trying to be honest here, to tell this the way it happened instead of the way a story wants to go. So I'll say this clearly. What I saw could have been someone playing a trick. It could have been light. It could have been 100 things. But I saw movement in the gap between two tombs, a narrow slit where the darkness seemed to have a texture. It was like someone turned slowly sideways and the black of their dress had a sheen. I didn't see a face. I didn't see hands. Just the sense of a person in old-fashioned clothes sliding past, the arc of something above her shoulder that could have been the underside of a parasol. "Okay," Renee said, as if that were an answer. "He unlocked the gate." "Wait," I said. You thought right, he said. This is the part where I say please go home. He pushed the gate a few inches. It made that old hinge groan that sounds like a voice in a story you tell children so they know better. But I'm not letting you idiots hop the fence and crack your heads. If you're going to ignore me, you're doing it with me. The woman with the bike said a short prayer I recognized from a childhood I thought I'd shaken off. Maya looked exhilarated. I felt like we were stepping onto a boat that hadn't actually steadied at the dock. The air inside was a different temperature. Cooler but thick. Sound changed. Our shoes on the path made softer noises than they should have. The crying faded as we moved in, then returned in the opposite direction like it was moving around us or we were looping. Renee stayed close, flashlight aimed low at the ground. He told us to keep to the worn gravel. The ground's uneven, he said. Some of these spots are soft. I knew what that meant and tried not to picture it. We passed the Dumont tomb and the Arsenault and the Lafitte cousin. The little wind-up lantern sat where I remembered it. Only now there were two. One on each side of the family vault Stella had called the mourners. The new one was Brazier, the glass cleaner. I had the brief childish thought that someone had set them out like candles for a birthday cake. Renee stopped. Who put that there? He set his flashlight beam on the newer lantern and the glass threw the light back dull. Baptiste, he said. He's playing. Caretaker sense of humor. Maya whispered. The crying shifted like a sigh. Renee crouched and rattled the new lantern. You could hear the wick flick in the oil. It wasn't lit either. He rocked back to stand and that's when the rain started. Not a downpour, just a steady wet whisper. It ran down the tomb faces in little veins. It filled the air with a smell like old iron and citrus. We took shelter under a live oak that had shouldered 2 vaults apart as it grew. The Spanish moss hung down like curtains. The crying went quiet. I know how that sounds, like a cliché. The ghost stops when the rain starts. That wasn't the unnerving part. The unnerving part was the way the rain made everything else louder. The streetcars, the imperfect gutters, some music far away in a bar, and still, under it, a tiny click. Like a lighter when it doesn't catch, click, click, click. Renee's flashlight wavered. He adjusted it. The beam crossed the older lantern and I saw, clear as I have ever seen anything in my life, a flame standing up inside the glass like someone had cupped a match in their hands. It shouldn't have been possible. The rain was coming in at an angle, and the lantern windows were streaked and open at the top for air. The flame didn't flicker. It didn't even shrug. Don't touch that, Renee said. He said it fast and not to any one of us in particular. Maya took a step forward anyway. It's a trick, she said, but her voice was quieter now. Like those camping lanterns. Some chemical thing. You want to smell the chemical thing? Renee asked. You want to take that home? The crying began again. Not closer or farther, but somehow inside the same space as us. As if we had stepped into a room and closed a door we didn't know existed. I felt a pressure along the inside of my ears like when a plane is descending. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out on reflex. Unknown number. The area code matched New Orleans. I let it go to voicemail, thinking I'd check it after we left. The flame in the lantern pulled my attention like a magnet. It's embarrassing to admit I crouched a little to look level with it. The way children do with fish tanks. There was a hair caught in the glass, a single thread dark and coiled. It moved, not with the rain, not with any wind, but as if someone had brushed it with a fingertip. I blinked and it wasn't there, and I nearly convinced myself I'd imagined it until a drop of water ran down the inside surface where no drop could be. Renee said softly, "All right, ma'am. We're going." He said it the way you'd talk to an older relative who decided to do something inconvenient at a party. He nodded at the tomb. "We're going now." We turned back toward the gate. I say toward the gate because that is where we intended to go. This is the part that is hardest to explain without sounding like I'm trying to make it worse than it was. The paths did not rearrange themselves. The tombs did not shuffle like a deck of cards. It wasn't dramatic. We just took a left where we should have taken a right. And then we corrected by going straight into a row that curved, and after 3 turns too many we were back at the same vault with the 2 lanterns like we'd never moved. Maya laughed. "Okay, that's funny." She laughed again, but it was a hiss this time. "Seriously?" Renee didn't laugh. "This is why we don't play," he said. "Don't look at their names. Don't read. Don't let them put you in a story." We tried again. The rain slacked to a mist. We gave the vault our backs and followed the outer wall. or what we thought was the outer wall, only to find ourselves facing a different corner that looked exactly the same. And then an iron cross I remembered from earlier. And then, this is true, a broken vase with a clump of artificial lilies that had gone sun-bleached on one side so they were greenish-white like you see on the backs of leaves. I remembered that exact bruised color. We were walking in a circle, not a perfect one. More like the kind a tired child draws around a table. Maya got her phone out for the compass app and held it flat on her palm. The little red needle spun like it was tipsy. "Oh, come on," she said, but there was no anger in it, only a thin thread of fear. "It's fine," I told her, because that's what you say when no one believes it. "Just a grid. A bunch of rectangles. We can keep one hand on the wall like if you're lost in a maze." Renee shot me a look. "This isn't a maze," he said. "It's a city. You don't put your hand on a city and tell it where to go." While we argued about something we had already decided, we had decided to be scared and to pretend we weren't. The crying moved for the first time. It traveled, not like footsteps. It didn't rise and fall. It slid along the edges of the air and settled about 10 feet to our right. I didn't mean to look. I looked. A figure stood between two tombs whose names I didn't process. She wasn't a blur. She was not a smear of shadow or a trick of dark angles. She was there in a dress that fell to the ground in layers that had once been heavy, but now seemed to hang from themselves. Her parasol wasn't over her head. It was folded, closed like an umbrella, the tip resting on the gravel. Her hands held the handle halfway down. One glove was gray with water. I could tell you her face was obscured. I could say the hat brim shadowed her features. That would be easy. But the truth is worse. I could have seen her face if I'd wanted. There was nothing in the way. Her features were exact. They were also wrong in a way that I can't articulate without sounding mean. She looked like a person whose expression had been practiced so many times it stopped being about anything. Imagine you meet someone you recognize from an old photograph, and they smile exactly the way they smiled in the photograph. Imagine they hold it too still. That was her face. She had the sadness arranged on it like a mask she was required to wear by someone who'd never seen sadness. She made the smallest motion with her hand, like the movement you'd use to show a child where to step so they wouldn't get their shoes muddy. She wanted us to follow. Renee whispered, "No." He said it again, "No." I felt Maya shift beside me. I don't know if she meant to take a step. I only know that I put my hand out without looking and found her wrist, and she grabbed onto me like she needed a landmark. The mourner's mouth moved. If she said words, they didn't make it to us intact. It was like the sound of them got lost in the rain, and yet my mind supplied a subtitle that I'm not sure is trustworthy. The subtitle said, "Here, please, here." And then it said, "Don't forget the lantern." I might have laughed then, in that high, useless way people laugh when they're about to cry. "We're leaving," I told her. I sounded like I was apologizing for a bad date. "I'm sorry. We're leaving." She didn't step toward us or away. She made the same small gesture again, and for a second I saw the parasol's fabric, what was left of it. It had a faded pattern, not flowers, not dots, something geometric, worn pale like the design had tried to remove itself. I thought of bleach. I thought of fever. The crying began again, but it didn't come from her mouth. It came from the ground. It came from behind my knees. It came from the seam of the tomb door at my left and the corner of the wall at my right, and from inside the glass of the newer lantern whose wick had found a light while we were looking at the woman. The older lantern's flame leaned just slightly, as if it were a person turning to listen. The rain ran down the sides of both lanterns like they weren't there. Renee said, loud enough this time to break whatever held us, "We're done." He put his hand on my shoulder and on Maya's, and that's when my phone rang again. "Same unknown number," I answered. On the other end, there was the noise of someone not breathing exactly but trying to remember how. You know the sound kids make when they've cried too hard and the air comes in hiccups? It was like that, but slowed down. Whispered words came through in a voice that didn't belong to anyone I know. "Lanterns burning. Lanterns burning. Lanterns," and then a scrape, and then, "Don't let it go out." I hung up so fast my thumb hurt. We started walking. It should have been simple. There was the wall. There was the path hugging it. We would keep our left shoulders close to stone and follow the curve. We would not look over our right shoulders at the empty place where a parasol might be. We would not check the lanterns to see if their flames leaned like ears. We would step with care because the ground is uneven. Some spots are soft and the city has a way of swallowing your ankles if you don't respect it. And it worked. 10 steps, 20. The streetlight glow at the gate appeared not far off, exactly where it should have been all along. I could hear the wet whisper of tires on City Park Avenue. I could smell the fried dough sweetness from a stand near the streetcar stop. We were almost there when Maya stopped. "Where's Renee?" she asked. I realized I didn't feel his hand on my shoulder anymore. I turned, expecting him to be right behind us or slightly off to the side because he'd gotten distracted by some maintenance thing only he would notice. He wasn't there. I saw him halfway back down the path, hat dark with rain, flashlight at his feet. He stood still like people do when they're listening for a faint sound. He looked toward the deeper part of the cemetery where the rows turn narrow and the names on the stone crowd each other. He put a hand up, asking us to wait a second. I remember thinking how civilized that gesture looked, how normal. Then he stepped left between two tombs and was gone. We called his name once, then louder. Maya picked up his flashlight and swept it through the gap he'd slipped into, but it hit a wall not 3 feet in. No passage, no walkway, just a dead end and our voices coming back to us without his name in them. We did not go after him. I wish I could claim I tried. I'm not going to lie, I didn't. Maya didn't either. We went to the gate like you go to a door when you smell smoke. Outside, the woman with the bike was gone. The street was washed clean in a way that suggested it wouldn't stay clean for long. I made myself turn around once and look back down the row. There was nothing moving except rain and moss, but the older lantern, the one with the scuffed glass, burned like it had decided to teach the rain some manners. It lit the name on the tomb in a way that preserved nothing. I couldn't read the letters. It didn't matter. I knew them from the tour. It was the family door. Maya called 911. We kept our voices down because it seemed wrong to be loud. The operator asked what happened, and I heard myself say something about a missing person, about a security guard, about a cemetery, and a locked gate. She asked if there had been an altercation. I said no. She asked if he had been drinking. I said I didn't know. She asked where we were. I looked at the street sign and gave her the intersection. When the police came, and then a couple of people from the city, and finally a man who looked like he'd either just woken up or never properly slept, I found out that Baptiste was real and he was, in fact, a caretaker. He was also tired of this story. He listened to what we told him, nodded in the right places, and then went inside with 2 officers. They came back 20 minutes later, soaked through, saying they didn't see anyone and that our friend had probably gone out the other side. Maya said there was no other side. The officer said a city this old has more than one exit if someone wants one. He wrote down our names and our hotel and told us to get some rest. We did not sleep. At 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification from the unknown number. I didn't want to listen. I listened. It was the same whisper voice saying the same words. Don't let it go out. There was an exhale at the end that sounded like, please, but it might have been rain against the microphone. The next day, the conference wrapped up and we were supposed to go home. I wasn't going to, but what else was I going to do? Patrol the perimeter of a graveyard? Maya gamed out scenarios in the taxi like a lawyer prepping an amateur case. We'd miscounted rows. Renee had a key to a side gate. He'd spotted a kid inside and gone after them. When our plane lifted off, my ears popped and the city became a pattern of roofs and water stains. I looked for the cemetery from the window and saw only a patchwork of light and darker light. Back home, my phone kept the New Orleans area code like a new friend who didn't know when to leave. A call came every night for a week, always around the time rain seems likely. Sometimes it went to voicemail. Sometimes I answered and heard only quiet long enough to make me say, hello? Twice. On the 4th night, the whisper voice did something different. It said my name. It didn't get it exactly right. It made the R too soft, like someone unfamiliar with it. It said my last name with the wrong stress. The rest of what it said was what I'd already heard. Lanterns burning. Don't let it go out. I changed my number. The call stopped. I slept better. This would be the end if not for 3 things. The first thing happened a month later when a padded envelope arrived at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a wind-up lantern. Not new, not old enough to be charming. Scuffed glass. Same model as the one at the tomb. I turned it over and checked for a note, a trick, a prank. There was nothing. The wick was unused. It smelled faintly like damp paper and worn fabric, the way thrift stores smell when the air conditioning is working too hard. I put it on a shelf and then, after a few days, into a closet because even unlit it felt like an eye. The second thing is more difficult to explain in a way that doesn't make me sound like I'm reaching. Around that same time I started waking up to the sound of rain when it wasn't raining. I'd lie there and listen to nothing hit the windows, to no water in the gutters, to the non-drip of my kitchen faucet. Sometimes the quiet would switch to that contained crying for a second, just long enough to remind me of the shape of it, like a photo negative after you close your eyes. I told no one. Maya and I kept in touch for a while, texting in fits, sending each other screenshots of our weather apps like proof we hadn't imagined humidity. The third thing happened this spring. I went to New Orleans for work again because companies are practical like that. New city, same hotel chain. I didn't ask to go. My boss assigned me and I said okay because I wasn't going to move my life around a place I visited for 2 days and left scared of. That's what I told myself. I didn't go to Greenwood. I didn't even route a walk within a mile of it. I went to meetings, smiled at people, used too many small napkins. On the last day, someone in our group suggested a beignet place on City Park Avenue, and my stomach did a thing, like it remembered something my brain had decided to leave alone. I almost said no. I said yes. It felt silly not to. You can't see the cemetery from the cafe. You can feel it, though. It sits in the corner of your eye like you forgot something. On the way out, a man bumped my shoulder and said, "Oh, excuse me." And when I turned, it was Baptiste from that night. He looked the same amount of tired. I told him who I was. He nodded. That same slow, unsurprised nod New Orleanians have when the world does something weird again and they file it under happens. "They ever call you?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Me too," he said, like he was telling me it had rained after all. "Renee?" he added. I shook my head. "His sister says he's staying with a cousin in Baton Rouge," he said. I say to her, "That boy left his lunch in my fridge. Ain't nobody go to Baton Rouge without their lunch." We stood there, strangers with a shared story. I asked him if he thought it was a trick. "What isn't?" he asked back. He looked toward where the cemetery would be if we could see it. Some tricks, they're old enough they become the shape of the place. Folks forget who started them. Before he left, he put his hand on my shoulder like he had done to me and Maya that night. The same weight and caution. "If you ever pass by after dark," he said, "and you hear crying, go home. If you ever find a lantern burning in your house and you don't know how it got lit, don't blow it. Don't touch it. Don't look at the glass too long. Just open your door and let the night take it back. That's not for you." I told him I didn't own a lantern. He smiled. "Good," he said. "Keep it that way." I didn't tell him about the one in my closet. I haven't even told Maya. It felt too much like inviting something to sit down. I flew home the next morning. My plane landed to a dry blue sky. I slept hard that night, deep and boring, and woke to the smell of rain. Not the sound. The smell. Petrichor, like science, labels the thing that makes it okay to love. I lay there and stared at the ceiling and pretended to myself that I had dreamed the smell, because people forget that scent is a real sense, that it can be wrong. When I got up, my closet door was open. I don't know if I left it that way. I probably did. The lantern sat on the floor where I'd put it, only not exactly. It had been turned a little so that the glass window faced out. A thin smear on the glass caught the light. I leaned down. It was a print. Not a full handprint, not greasy or obvious. More like a starburst where a fingertip touched and dragged a little. The print wasn't in a skin oil pattern. It was in the faintest ash. I was stupid. I reached for the handle. I stopped because my phone buzzed in the other room. Unknown number. My chest felt like an elevator starting down too fast. I didn't answer. The voicemail icon popped up. I didn't listen. All day I worked and told myself I would throw the lantern away that night. Throwing things away is clean. It draws a line. That evening I took a trash bag out of the roll under my sink and went to the closet. The lantern was gone. I hadn't moved it. I tore the closet apart, then my bedroom, then my apartment with the kind of focus you get when you're trying not to think about the other option. I was on my hands and knees checking under my bed when the air got cooler in that not quite air-conditioned way. The smell of rain intensified, and for a second a draft went past my cheek like someone walking quickly in a long dress. The crying began inside the room like a radio turned low. I stood up. The window was closed. The outside was clear. My door was locked. I said something aloud that I won't repeat because it was either a prayer or profanity, and I don't want to give it credit. The crying stopped. Outside, a truck passed, and then a neighbor called to her kid, and then a bird made a sound like laughter. The normal world returned itself to me like change from a cashier. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at nothing in particular until I could move again. Then I did what I always do. I made a plan. Plans are a way to move your body even when your thoughts are stuck. The plan was to donate the lantern, not to the thrift store too close, to a prop house a few neighborhoods over that rents things to theaters and film students. I put on shoes and got my keys and opened my front door. The lantern sat on the hallway floor outside my apartment, wick black and clean as if new. It was dry even though the hallway had those damp cinderblock walls that always managed to feel wet after a rain that never fell. Next to it was a folded paper umbrella from a drink, the cheap kind that splinters. Someone had drawn little diamonds on it in pencil, a pattern like the faded one I'd seen on a parasol. I stood there, door half open, my apartment behind me breathing out cool air, the hallway smelling like dust and something old. I did not touch the lantern. I did not bring it in. I took the elevator down, walked out to the dumpster enclosure and put the drink umbrella in the trash because that was petty and human and manageable. I haven't seen the lantern since. A part of me believes someone was messing with me and got bored. Another part of me does not ask questions it can't use. I don't answer unknown numbers. I don't keep umbrellas in the house. I don't buy flowers if I can help it. Last week, Maya texted me a photo from a market somewhere, black lace parasols under a tent, and I put my phone face down. 2 nights ago, my building's fire alarm went off at 2 a.m. Everyone spilled into the parking lot in pajamas, blinking and irritated, clutching pets and phones. There was no fire. The fire department walked through, checked, said a sensor tripped. We laughed and swore and went back inside. On my way up the stairs, I passed a man from the 3rd floor I'd never spoken to. He was holding his key in a paper bag with takeout oil bleeding through, and he looked tired in the same way Baptiste had looked tired, like the city had put something in him he hadn't asked for. He said to no one in particular, "Smelled like rain." It didn't, not to me. Maybe that's good. Maybe it means whatever I carried home washed off. Or maybe I just can't smell it anymore. Sometimes you tell a story to get it out of your mouth. Sometimes you tell a story like setting a lantern on a stepside. A small light to warn people away. If you go to Greenwood Cemetery, go in daylight. Listen to your guide. Don't follow what you think you hear. If someone asks you to keep a light burning, ask them whose it is and why. If they don't answer, go home. If despite all that, you find yourself standing in a narrow row between tombs after dark with rain, turning the air into a secret, and you see a woman in black with a parasol closed like an umbrella, and her face is the exact shape of sadness held too still, and a lantern glows at your feet without moving in the wind, don't touch it. Don't try to blow it out. Don't look at your reflection in the glass. Turn around even if the paths don't agree with you, and walk in any direction that smells less like rain. And if your phone rings while you're walking and the number is one you don't know in a voice that sounds like someone learning to breathe says your name wrong, followed by, don't let it go out. You don't owe it anything. You don't owe it your attention.
Hang up, keep moving.
You were never part of that story, no matter how politely it asks. That's what I tell myself anyway when I wake up to silence too loud to be only quiet. And I feel, without hearing it, the weight of a closed parasol resting like a fingertip on the floorboards next to my bed. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't carry crystals. I don't read horoscopes. If something bumps in the night, I'm the one people look at to say, it's the pipes. But the thing that happened at Boot Hill and Tombstone still makes my mouth go dry when someone shuffles a deck of cards. I can't listen to the sound without seeing gravel and moonlight. This was last fall. I was driving from Phoenix to Bisbee to help my sister Maya move apartments. She'd broken up with her boyfriend and needed boxes and a truck and a familiar face. I picked up our friend Luis on the way, because he's the kind of guy who brings bungee cords and snacks and doesn't complain when you ask him to carry the heavy stuff. He's a jokester, basically. Makes the world feel less serious. We got to Bisbee late, moved what we could, then crashed on her old living room floor. In the morning, Maya said, "Do we have time for one detour before we finish?" She had this look like she was already bracing for a no. "Where?" I asked, sipping the coffee she'd made in a chipped French press. Tombstone. It's only half an hour. I want to show Luis the kitschy gunfight shows. You'll like Boot Hill, I don't know. You just feel it there. Luis grinned. I'm always down for kitsch. I checked my mental timeline. We could spare an hour. 2 if we rushed later. Okay, I said. But let's be efficient tourists. The drive through the desert was the kind of quiet that eats sound. Low mountains, the dirt the color of old pennies, creosote and scrub, and that particular high white sky that makes shadows razor sharp. We rolled into Tombstone in late morning and parked near Allen Street. There were people already out in period costumes, and a guy with a waxed mustache asked if we wanted to see where the Earps stood. Luis joked that he had an appointment at high noon. Maya elbowed him. Boot Hill before the shows? She asked. It's better with fewer people. We walked up the slight hill toward the cemetery. The heat was a dry, close wait. There's a gift shop at the entrance. I'm not judging, it's just the way of things. And a woman at the counter handed us a photocopied map with a little legend of the famous graves. Keep to the path, she said. Don't lean on the markers. They're old. Boot Hill isn't big. It's fenced in with simple headboards, wood planks with names burned or painted into them and stones piled around. Talk to enough people and they'll tell you Tombstone is mostly performance, mostly reenactments and staged gunfire. But Boot Hill sits weirdly quiet above the theater of it all. There were wind chimes on a porch somewhere down the hill, and the wind kept almost lifting them and setting them down again, like a breath that never committed to air. The gravel paths were pale and our shoes made that dry crunch. I read names that didn't mean anything to me, then names that did. Billy Clanton, Frank and Tom McClory. They died at their ages and I stood there at mine. Doing the math a person does when the past is touchable. He was 21, I'm 34. He never got past a year I don't even think about anymore. Look, Maya said, pointing. 3 small coins sat neatly on top of one of the headboards. Dull quarters that had lost their shine. People leave stuff. For luck? Luis asked. For the dead, she said. Or for themselves. Depends on the person. We wandered. A ranger, I don't know his exact title. He had a badge and the dust-soft hat. Came up the path from the far corner. He was older. Rawhide thin with a wristwatch that looked like it had been through things. His name tag said Earl. He nodded at us like we'd been there longer than we had. Morning, he said. Any questions, ask away. Just keep to the paths. Snakes like the stones. Rattlers? Luis asked. Yep, Earl said. And bull snakes. But the bull snakes are the ones you want to see. Earn their keep. He moved on, slow and deliberate. I noticed his boots left almost no imprint in the gravel. Some people walk like they're trying not to disturb the ground. I don't know when it started, the noticing thing. The first one was small. I heard footsteps behind me on the path and stepped aside automatically to let someone pass. No one passed. I turned around. Maya and Luis were 10 yards back, reading a marker together and laughing quietly about a name. I think it was Dutch Annie. And there was no one else on our stretch of path. The footsteps were that same crunch as if someone with weight and direction had been right at my shoulder. When I looked back at the gravel, I saw what my own steps had done. They were messy, slightly inward, the pattern you make when you're not paying attention. But there was a second line beside them, lighter, neater. As if someone had been walking where I was walking, only the stones had sprung back almost all the way. If I hadn't stopped, I wouldn't have noticed. As it was, I could barely convince myself they were there. By then, the heat had burned into my temples. I told myself it was the sun. You hear what you expect to hear at a place like this. The neuroscientist in me, not a real one, but we all have an inner know-it-all, said something about pattern recognition and white noise. Gravel being like radio static, you can tune into whatever station you want. Hey, Luis called. Get over here. This is the one I was telling you about. He pointed at a marker with a typewritten summary stuck to a post. It was for unknown miners, 3 men found dead near a wash, shot in the back. Their names, if they ever had them, didn't survive. Maya squeezed her water bottle until it crinkled. They keep finding bones when it rains, she said. Washes uncover stuff. Earl had come back around. He joined us without saying anything, stood a respectful distance from the marker and looked at the sky like he could tell what was coming 3 hours ahead. Monsoon season does it, he said finally. Ground remembers things. It spits them out. I don't know if it's because Earl said that or because it had been rising on its own, but the feeling I had, like you get when you're being watched and try to laugh at yourself for it, dialed up. It wasn't one pair of eyes. It was many. Not angry exactly, just present, like a classroom full of kids waiting for your next move. "We should come back tonight," Louise said. It was a joke. It's the kind of thing you say at a cemetery because you know you won't. He waggled his eyebrows. "Bring a Ouija board." "Ouija boards are just spelling practice," Maya said, but she smiled. Earl didn't smile. "Cemeteries closed after sunset," he said. "Fence gate gets locked for a reason." When we left, the woman at the counter asked if we wanted any postcards. Maya bought one with the famous names printed on top of a sepia photo. I used the bathroom because I'd been chugging water and the desert has a way of wringing it out of you. When I came out, Earl was standing next to a display of little tin badges and dusty keychains. He nodded at me like he knew I'd come out right then. "You from around here?" he asked. "Phoenix," I said. "Stay long?" "Just today." "Helping my sister move." He glanced toward the window, then back at me. "Watch your pockets tonight." I waited for the punchline, but he just kept looking. "Tourist pickpockets?" I offered. He tilted his head. "Cards go missing. Wallet cards, decks, people drop them accidentally." "Accidentally." He made little air quotes with dry fingers. "It's a thing. Folks like to dare." "We're not planning any dares," I said and tried to smile. "Good," he said. Then almost to himself. "It's loud enough after dark. We did the shows on Allen Street." Gunfire blanks cracked like someone punching a saucepan, and tourists clapped and kids covered their ears. And a man with a fake cigar talked louder than anyone should need to. It was fun in the way a theme park can be fun when you willingly suspend disbelief. We had lunch. Maya got a taco salad and a fried shell that could have doubled as a drum. While we ate, Luis took out a deck of cards he'd bought at the gift shop. They were souvenir cards, with sepia photos of tombstone on the backs. He started doing a rapid riffle shuffle and smiled in a way he thinks is charming, but mostly puts him in the mischief category. "Put those away," Maya said. "We'll lose them in the truck." "I should leave 3 on a grave," he said, winking at me. "You heard Earl?" I said. Luis stopped shuffling. He said it lightly, but when he looked up I could tell he was checking the room. "Who's Earl?" "The ranger," I said. "He's been here a long time, I think." "I thought you meant your imaginary childhood friend," he said, and did the flourish where you spring the cards from hand to hand like a waterfall. "He's good with that stuff, too good. The cards make a sound like a river of paper going from one palm to the other." We moved the rest of Maya's stuff in the afternoon, and by the time we unloaded the last box it was past 7. The sky had gone that bruised purple you only see in the desert. Streetlights in Bisbee clicked on with a little electric sigh. We ate pizza on upturned crates. Maya said something about the cemetery again, how it felt like the ground had a pulse up there, and then shrugged it off with a laugh. By 10 she had crashed on her new bed. Luis and I stood on the little balcony and looked out over the old miner houses and the hillside lights, and listened to some band practicing badly 2 blocks away. He took the card deck from his pocket and fanned it with one hand. "Do not drop those," I said. "They'll slide into some crack in the boards and you'll blame me for losing them." He closed them and slipped the box into his jacket. He's always been one of those people who keeps his hands moving, like stillness invites trouble. I should have left it there. I should have said goodnight and gone to sleep on the couch with the world normal. But I was thinking about footsteps that weren't there and the way the gravel had formed near prints beside mine. "Want to drive back up for 5 minutes?" I heard myself say, "just to see if it feels different at night." Luis made a face with his mouth, but not his eyes. "You're the one who told me not to," he said. And then after a beat, "Yeah. Okay, quick." We didn't wake Maya. We left a note on the kitchen counter that just said, "Be right back." I grabbed my keys and a flashlight from her junk drawer, a heavy, old one, and we drove back toward Tombstone on quiet roads that smelled like dust and a distant hint of rain. By the time we reached the cemetery, the town proper was mostly shadows and neon beer signs. Boot Hill sat darker than everything else, like the absence of a streetlight was deliberate. The little gift shop was dark. The gate was closed, chain looped, padlock hanging. The fence wasn't terribly high, knee and hip at most, but it was the closed sign that made me feel like we'd be stepping onto something that wasn't ours. Luis put his hands on the fence rails and leaned forward. 5 minutes? He said. 3, I said. We walked the perimeter. On the far side, A mesquite tree bent low to the fence, its branches hanging over like a green fringe. We could slip under a section where the earth had eroded a bit. I dropped to my stomach and pushed through, getting grit up my shirt. When I stood up, the smell of dry plant sap and sun-baked wood hit me. The night was loud with insects. The stars felt closer than they should have. Luis came through behind me and brushed himself off theatrically. "We are officially trespassing," he said, and put a hand on his heart. "Dear Department of whatever, we intend no harm." We kept to the path because that felt like a bare minimum gesture. The gravel under my shoes sounded a little different than day. Sharper, like the air was thinner and the stones could hear us. "I don't like this," I said, quietly. "Then why did we?" "I don't know," I said, and realized that was the truest answer. I wanted to see if the feeling was there without people around to give it an explanation. We moved past the famous markers. In the dark, the wood shone silver where it had been rubbed smooth by hands. I played my flashlight low, not wanting to flood the place. We arrived at the unknown miners. I turned the light off. We listened. I know how this sounds. I know you think I'm going to say we heard bootsteps immediately, or a whisper, or a coyote singing like someone's broken heart. We didn't. We stood in the dark and heard our breathing and the insects and the slight constant shush of wind moving through things. I started to feel stupid. I started to think about the padlock and the chain and the fact that we had crawled under a fence like kids. "Okay," I said. "We did it. Let's go." Then the gravel moved behind us. Not a footstep, a slide. Like someone had turned and shifted weight. It was so small that if I had been alone, I would have excused it. But Luis heard it too because his breath hitched. "I'm going to pretend that was a rabbit," he said. "Rabbits don't wear boots," I said, and immediately hated myself for saying it. Because turning fear into a joke gives it an outline. We didn't turn around right away. I don't know why. There's this instinct that runs deeper than whatever fight or flight is supposed to be. If you act normal, the thing watching you will also act normal. If you pretend you didn't notice, maybe it will grant you that mercy. When we finally looked, there was no one on the path. My flashlight skated across gravel, across white stone mounds, across the chips, and here and there, a coin someone had left that caught the light like a tiny sun. But the path was no longer undisturbed. There were impressions beside ours, neat and parallel, like someone had recently walked just out of reach and would continue to do so, as long as we weren't looking directly at them. Luis took the deck of cards out of his jacket. He wasn't joking. His hands were doing that thing they do when he wants something to feel like his. "I'm going to leave these," he said, "as an offering." Or, what's the word, an appeasement, I said. "Yeah, that." He placed the deck on the headboard of the unknown miners. The box looked ridiculous in that moment. Cheap cardboard with a tourist photo printed on it, resting on wood that had been out in more weather than either of us had ever stood through. He stepped back. I took his elbow. We listened. The night had shifted one notch louder. The insects raised their pitch. The wind breathed. I started to think that the deck would just sit there and collect dust and someone in the morning would throw it away. And that would be better for humanity than what my stomach was telling me, which was, don't wait to see what happens with your eyes. The deck slid a fraction toward the path. There was no hand on it. There was no incline. It just moved, not gracefully, more like something had hooked a fingernail under the box and dragged. The sound it made was quiet but wrong, like a book being pulled across sandpaper. "Okay," I said. It came out in a whisper I didn't intend. "Okay, we didn't run." We started to walk quickly, and then, as we made the turn toward the mesquite side and the little fence gap, we heard it again, footsteps that were not ours, keeping a parallel pace in the strip of dark right beside the wash of my light. Crunch, crunch, a whisper of words. Not words we could understand, more like the rhythm of speech without the sound. A bet called across a table when you've been up all night and your voice is smoked out. Luis kept saying okay in a loop, like he was agreeing with a person who wasn't talking. The mesquite loomed. We reached the fence and I went down first, crawling under the sagging part. Dirt got in my mouth. I came up on the other side and turned back to help pull Luis through. He wasn't there. He was on the path, 3 steps away, staring at something off to his left. He had that posture like when you see a spider you don't want to startle. Shoulders tight, chin pulled back, knees bent like gravity had doubled. "Don't," he said, and I couldn't tell if he was talking to me or to what he was looking at. Don't. I lifted the flashlight and then thought better of it and kept it low. In its edge glow, I saw 3 shapes seated on the ground near one of the stones. It is a terrible thing to watch your brain correct itself. At first I thought they were stumps, or 3 people in dark coats with their faces turned away the way you can mistake fence posts for people on an empty road at night. Then one of them lifted its hand. It was a sleeve, not skin, a dark old cut of coat and a lighter shape at its end. A card. The corner caught the beam and made a pale blink. "Luis," I said. He didn't move. The figure laid the card down on the ground, not a table. There was no table, just on the packed earth beside the headboard, in a neat fan where a neat hand would fan them. Another shape leaned in. I knew without needing detail that there was nothing where eyes should have been. And where there should be empty, there was something else. Darkness deeper than the dark we were standing in. Like a hole burned in film, the sound was light, unashamedly mundane, the slap of paper on dirt, the whisper of fingers gripping a card's edge, the slide of a coin being pushed across a rough surface. I smelled tobacco that couldn't be there anymore. I smelled old wool. "Luis," I said again, and this time the name came out the way you talk to someone close to a ledge. He started backward without turning. His hand found the fence rail. I wrapped my fingers around his wrist and pulled him under. The gravel crunched and the whispering voices paused like we had just thrown off a count. Luis's jacket snagged on a wire and he swore. My flashlight skittered, beam spinning out across the path, and for a flash it cut across the ground where the cards should be. There was nothing, bare dirt. The deck on the headboard was gone. We ran. We didn't look back. We ran all the way to the truck and slammed the doors and sat with the engine idling, while the night pressed its face against the closed windows, the way a kid presses against glass to see fish in a tank. Luis was shaking in a way that made the keys in the ignition chime. "Did you?" he said. "Yes," I said. "I left the..." he said. "I know." We drove to Maya's apartment with the headlights too bright, like we could erase what we'd seen by flooding the road with light. We parked crooked. We went inside and didn't wake her. We didn't say anything until we were on the floor in the living room again, listening to the refrigerator click on and off and a train far away blow its horn like someone trying to remind the night that the world was still normal. "Tomorrow," Luis said, hoarse, "we go back. We get the deck. Before the shop opens, we put it back on their shelf." He swallowed. "We didn't take it. We didn't steal it." I almost laughed, but it was too on the edge of a sob. "We didn't take it," I said. "They did. We didn't sleep. We kept our shoes on like we were going to have to leave immediately. Around 4 in the morning, the night lost its hold and turned into that gray that never feels like morning, so much as the absence of night. Maya came out, hair a mess, eyes puffy. She looked at us and then at our shoes. "What did you do?" she asked. I told her we drove out to look at the stars. Luis looked at the floor. We went back to Tombstone when the sun was safely up, like a parent going into a compromised room after the toddler has finally stopped screaming. The gift shop opened at 9. Earl was there, sweeping the front step with a straw broom older than me. He looked at us the way you look at a lot of things at once and picked the one that matters. "Morning," he said. "Hi," I said, and my voice did the polite thing because habit is stronger than horror. "We left a deck last night," Luis said. "Stupid, I know. Can we, he gestured toward the cemetery. "Can we get it back? We'll pay you, I don't want it out there." Earl leaned the broom against the wall. He took off his hat and ran a hand through hair gone mostly to silver. "You went over the fence," he said. "Not a question, yes," I said. He nodded once. "You see folks?" I didn't know what he meant for a second. "People?" I asked. "Folks," he said again, patient. Luis made a sound that might have been a laugh. I don't know what I saw." "You saw folks," Earl said. "Cards?" "Yes," I said. "They were playing." "They always are," Earl said, and then added like he had to. "Some nights louder than others." He walked us inside. He didn't ask for a ticket. He didn't look at Maya, who had wisely chosen to stay in the truck. He took a ring of keys from his pocket and picked out a small one that looked like it belonged to a diary-sized lock. He handed it to me. "You can open the gate. You can go to where you left it. You won't find it." "Then why?" Luis started. "Because if you don't look," Earl said, "you'll think you left something changeable. If you look and don't find it, you'll know where it is." "Where is it?" Earl's eyes flicked to the fence line, then back. where it belongs. We went up the path like normal people. We walked to the unknown miners. The headboard was there. The stones were there. There was a depression in the dirt where a deck might have sat briefly before being moved. There were 3 coins on the marker now, shiny ones that caught the morning new like somebody had just laid them down. I reached out and touched one. It was warm. Luis kept scanning the ground. It would have been funny if it had been any other morning how obvious his hope was. Maybe a raccoon, he said. Maybe a kid came early. Maybe. You won't find it, Earl had said. He hadn't followed us. He was waiting by the gate like a chaperone who knows the exact plot of the field trip you're insisting on discovering yourself. We stayed too long. People started to trickle in. Families in shorts, a couple holding iced coffees from somewhere I couldn't see. 2 guys in biker vests. They threaded themselves into the paths and spoke in low voices like they'd automatically turned their volume down. The normal world moved around us. It was like seeing a crime scene under fluorescent lights and realizing it was just a room like any other. Luis put his hands in his pockets. He pulled them out again like he had touched something there that scared him. He held up his wallet and opened it. He didn't look at me. He looked at the card slots like he was counting a rosary. I had $50, he said. And my ID, and 2 cards. Do you still? They're here, he said. He blew out a breath that had been locked in his chest for too long. They're here. Then he laughed with more relief than I thought this situation should allow, and a little hysteria around the edges. Earl was messing with us. He closed the wallet. Something tapped the toe of his shoe. We both looked down. An old token, the kind you get from a carnival or a bar that used to run a laundry in the back, sat on the gravel by his boot. It had a star cut in the middle and no writing on either side. If I hadn't been looking at it, I would have bet money it hadn't been there a second ago. Luis reached for it and then drew back like it might bite. Keep it, I heard myself say. The words came out dry. Or don't. Your choice. We walked back to the gate. I handed Earl the key and his eyes measured something in our faces that he didn't comment on. He took the token from Luis's palm without asking. They trade, he said, slipping it into his pocket. Sometimes it's better to let them win one. We didn't play, Luis said. Earl shrugged, a little mean but not unfair. You brought a deck. We left Tombstone after that. We didn't go to any more shows. We didn't buy any t-shirts that said, "The town too tough to die." We drove back to Bisbee with the windows rolled up even though the air had cooled. Maya asked from the back seat what was wrong. We told her traffic. She didn't push. For the next few weeks, nothing happened, which is the most honest part of this account, I think. People expect the haunting to come home with you right away, to follow you into your shower and flicker your lights and whisper your name in the exact tone that makes your stomach fold in half. It didn't. I went to work. I mowed my tiny defeated patch of grass. I avoided the sound of cards being shuffled on TV without admitting that's what I was doing. Then slowly I started to notice small things. I would come home and find 3 coins stacked on my kitchen counter, even if I was sure I hadn't left any there. My pockets were sometimes lighter than they should have been, just by a coin or 2. The deck of cards I kept in a junk drawer for casual games of rummy with my neighbor went missing. I didn't remember moving it. When I bought another, that one went missing too, not immediately. They left it long enough that I thought I was being silly, then took it when I wasn't looking. I called Luis. Any? That's what he said when he answered, like I had asked him a question I hadn't. Any cards go missing? Yes, I said. And quarters? He asked. Yes, I said. He took a short breath. I hear bets. Small ones, when I'm almost asleep. Me too, I said, and that was the first time I admitted it out loud. They're not in words. No, he said. They're like the idea of a bet. Someone pushing something forward in the center. We didn't do anything about it. What would we have done? A priest, a sage bundle, a therapist? I tried a lot of normal things. I threw away the 3rd replacement deck. I stopped carrying cash. I put my wallet in a drawer at night and shut the drawer and put a heavy book on top of it. The next morning, one of the quarters from my glove compartment was on the kitchen table. Things settled into what they were going to be, a low drip of oddness. It had the rhythm of mice in a house you can't quite seal. The difference was that the mice weren't eating anything. They were playing. They were patient. They didn't want me to move. They wanted me to listen, occasionally, to the barely there slide of a card on a surface I couldn't see. 2 months later, A package arrived from a return address in Tombstone. No name. Just a P.O. box. Inside was a postcard, sepia photo, Boot Hill, the famous headboards like teeth in a smile that isn't friendly, and a single playing card wrapped in tissue. The card was the Queen of Spades. It wasn't from the souvenir deck we'd bought. It was older. The corners were soft. It smelled faintly of old wood and cloves. On the back, someone had written in neat printing, "You don't have to bring it back. They know." I went to the phone and dialed the gift shop number, which I'd had to dig up online because why would this be easy? A woman answered. It wasn't the same one, or if it was, she had one of those voices that changes across weeks. I asked for Earl. "Earl passed last winter," she said, like it was an answer people asked for a lot. "Snowbirded down to Tucson, didn't wake up one morning." "Bless him." "I'm sorry," I said. The words didn't cover the ground between us. "Left a box of postcards and old park keys," she added, practical. "I mail a few out now and then to people he wrote down. Says on the note there, for folks who'll understand." "He had a list?" I asked. "Oh yeah," she said with a little laugh. "Little spiral notebook. Names and no addresses for most, but he remembered yours after you asked for that deck. You and your friend. How did he remember our address? People think you can't find a person after they buy a souvenir, but the register keeps all kinds of internal stuff. Don't worry, we're not selling it. Earl just made a note, said you'd want a postcard." She paused. I heard the murmur of customers on her end, and a door opening and closing and wind purring through something hung with bone or shell. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice dropping as if she'd leaned closer to the mouthpiece. "Do you ever hear of games? Like at a bar from a long time ago?" "Yes," I said. I pressed the Queen of Spades to the counter with my index finger. The paper gave. It felt exactly like it was supposed to feel. Ordinary. "These aren't the worst kind," she said. "Not like some places. They're mostly just passing time." Earl said that. He said time passed them, so now they pass it back. We hung up. I put the Queen of Spades in my junk drawer on top of the heavy book that was supposed to keep my wallet safe. Later, when I went to show it to my neighbor because I thought hearing myself tell the story would make it silly again, the drawer was tidy, and the card was gone. In its place was a token with a star cut out of the middle. I don't know if this will be useful to anyone, except as a thing that wants to be told. If you go to Tombstone and decide you want a shiver to go with your souvenir, jump the fence if you must. I'm not your parent, but if you bring anything in with you, don't. And if you hear the gravel move in step with yours, don't turn around right away. You won't see what you think you're going to see. You'll see the space where someone is, and that is worse somehow than a face. The last thing is this. Every now and then, late, when the refrigerator clicks and the house makes that settling sigh, I hear the whispering. It's not words, not in any language I can swear to. It's the rhythm of people who've lost the day and don't have the night either. It sounds like patience made into sound. They're still there in their coats, playing a game where the rules slipped across a century without tearing. Sometimes I shuffle a deck and put it on the table and go brush my teeth and leave the room empty for a minute, just to see if living has any weight they care about. When I come back, the deck sits where I left it, perfect, undisturbed. Then I find a coin on my pillow or in my shoe, or at the bottom of my coffee mug after I drain it, and I know I lost a hand I didn't mean to play. If you ever visit Boot Hill, listen to the wind as it comes up the slope. Sometimes it carries voices that aren't there for you. Sometimes it carries the sound of a bet being placed. And if you feel someone walk beside you long enough that you start to move in their rhythm, don't panic. Don't run. Just walk until the path ends and the gravel turns back into plain ground. When you step off the path, the sound will stop. It will feel like mercy. But even then, you'll think about cards, and that's how they keep it going. Because it's not the grave they want, not really. It's the game. And if you've ever watched people who won't leave the table, you know there's nothing in the world more patient than a hand waiting to be dealt.